Ladies and gentlemen, let's settle down. Welcome back after a very long day yesterday. And we are expecting a rather more productive but still a long day today in order to ensure that we could get free by lunchtime tomorrow. But this is a conditional statement depending upon the amount of cooperation we get from your side during the day's proceedings. So you might have noticed some changes in the program of work today, which was after discussion within the Secretariat and with the DG. And the suggestion was to get those items out of the way today which require some extensive discussion or decision-making. So if hopefully we finish them today and a major part of the agenda, we'll be left with some items, some reports which only require noting by the board and some other procedural issues for tomorrow. So we will review our progress in middle of the day in the second session and decide whether we can live with just one session tomorrow morning and close at lunch. But again, let me remind you, this is a conditional statement. Let me also thank all the EB members, non-members, states, the non-state actors for sticking to the 2 minutes prescriptive 2 minutes interventions which we started yesterday. And we believe that 2 minutes keep the focus on the required subject. And eventually, maybe in one of the next board meetings, we shall restrict ourselves to 100 seconds. That's the golden period. But my sincere appreciation, and we hope that we continue that today as well. Monaco, you have the floor.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much indeed, Chairman, and I apologize for taking the floor so early this morning. Good morning to everybody. There's an old habit here at WHO, which is that open meetings, which are usually very important because we talk in more or less what is a closed session of very sensitive issues, when they are set, they aren't changed. I have a very busy agenda. I've changed my agenda as a consequence, and I've come here this morning to find that the program of work has been entirely changed. This isn't just for information. The evaluation of the Director General's election is a very important issue. It's a very sensitive one. And as I said, the program of work has been changed, and I'm sure that others may not be here tomorrow morning, because I'd be surprised if we managed to make that much progress today. So it's a great shame that such a hasty change of the agenda has been made, in particular because it's an open meeting. Thank you.
We note the concern of the Honourable Delegate, and there was some exceptional circumstances which were discussed. By no means putting off the open meeting for tomorrow undermines its importance. We still regret this inconvenience to the Honourable Member. Coming back to our change of the program, you have gone through today's program of work. We still would, and I am informing for the information of the members that we may, depending upon how the progress of the proceedings are, may like to alter a few agenda items with your consultation, of course, in in the later proceedings. But first, let me congratulate Australia today for this is the National Day of Australia, and we, on the behalf of the board and member states, we all congratulate you. So, Australia. And if you allow me, we will resume the proceedings where we left yesterday, and we start with the statement from Honourable Delegate of Malta, to be followed by Sweden. Malta, you have the floor.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. The EU and its member states fully support the draft Global Action Plan, as well as the draft resolution proposed by Thailand and others on physical activity. We would, however, like to draw the attention of colleagues to the urgent need to update the existing 2010 WHO recommendations on physical activity for health. Such an update will provide important guidance for member states in our effort to meet the new global target. We would therefore like to propose a friendly amendment to the draft resolution. After OP 5.1, we propose to insert a new OP 5.1 bis that would read, to update the global recommendations on physical activity for health. Brackets 2010. We hope the board will be able to support this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta. The Honourable Delegate from Sweden, followed by Japan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm speaking on behalf of the 8 Nordic and Baltic countries, Denmark, Estonia, Finland, Iceland, Latvia, Lithuania, Norway, and Sweden. We welcome the draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity, which is essential to the achievement of several SDGs. We would like to use this opportunity to raise a few points that we believe would benefit from further discussions. Several of the Nordic and Baltic countries are focusing on using accelerometers to monitor the level of physical activity. Objective monitoring of physical activity at population level gives more detailed information of the physical activity behavior than only self-report. And objective measures will most likely increase in the coming years. In order for these unique comparable data to be shared efficiently across countries, the WHO should develop data on data collection and data reporting in close cooperation with relevant actors. We support allocations of resources to actions needed to engage the least active and those who face the greatest barriers to increasing the level of physical activity. It would have big public health effect if this group of people could become more physically active. We support the action plan's strong focus on the importance of increasing physical activity and reducing sedentary behavior. However, the present recommendations on physical activity from 2010 do not include recommendations related to sedentary behavior. In order to implement the new Global Action Plan, it is essential that WHO, in addition, updates the global recommendations on physical activity for health. We urge the Secretariat to update the recommendations in 2018. The new recommendations should include recommendations on sedentary behavior based on review of existing evidence. I will end by stating that we support the draft resolution, including the amendment proposed by the EU and its member states. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sweden. I'll give the floor to Honourable Delegate from Japan, to be followed by Iraq. Japan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We support the physical activities for healthy and active longevity and join the sponsor of this resolution. We have 2 points. First, evidence is being accumulated. Physical activities are very helpful for the prevention of NCD and health through life course. For example, community interventions in Japan show that those senior citizens who exercise regularly with their friends live longer independently than their counterparts who do lonely sporting. Of course, smaller exercise groups brought the worst outcome. Second, based on such research outcomes, we wish to take the opportunity of the Olympic and Paralympic Games hosted by Japan in 2020 to enhance exercise for everyone, not only for top athletes. I thank you.
Thank you, Japan. Iraq, you have the floor, followed by Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Really, we support the draft resolutions about this physical activity, and Iraq has adopted physical activity, considering it as one of the issues for combating risk factors for NCD. That was through the following points. First, encouraging officials starting the Ministry of Health by using stairs instead of elevators. Secondly, forming teams for footballs and competition between departments in Ministry of Health for that, with assigning prizes for winners. And really this is headed by the High Excellency, the Minister of the Health. Another point is a practicing of intervals for physical activity in the meetings, like what we have really witnessed here in our meeting. Integration with other ministries for application of physical activity and ascertaining on the athletic lessons in the schools and universities, ascertaining of that approaches within school health services, and consider it as mandatory for the health of students in collaboration with the Ministry of Education and Ministry of Higher Education. And the last point, advocacy, communication and social mobilization through universal and local media for encouraging physical activity in the community is very, very important and has been stressed upon. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Iraq, for your inputs. I request Dominican Republic to take the floor, and followed by Mexico. You have the floor, sir.
Gracias, señor presidente.
Thank you very much, Chairman. We recognize that physical inactivity is one of the risk factors that is one of the most important reasons leading to NCDs, such as heart disease, stroke, cancer, and diabetes. And we believe that achieving the objectives in the draft action plan will be possible, but only with the full commitment of sectors such as the environment, education, health, sport, and technology. Only with the active involvement of those sectors will we be able to speed up the achievement of the voluntary global targets on NCDs established by the World Health Assembly for 2025, and indeed the SDG targets established for 2030. The plan calls for a strengthening of information systems. However, the assessment of indicators would involve the carrying out of major surveys with information within countries, and that would be extremely costly, given that countries of the Americas region require information on determining factors for NCDs. The Dominican Republic calls upon the organization to support the development of national capacities on monitoring and evaluation within the framework of the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. I would request Mexico to take the floor and to be followed by the honorable delegate from Philippines. Mexico.
Muchas gracias, señor.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Mexico recognizes the importance of physical activity for the well-being of peoples, and as a factor which protects them against various NCDs. That's why national measures to encourage physical activity must be multi-sectoral, with the active involvement of civil society, non-governmental organizations, the private sector, academia, and various government sectors. Multi-sectoral measures should help to raise awareness among the population of physical activity and its benefits. They must ensure that people carry out physical activity, provide spaces and the relevant opportunities for people to do that, and they must generate a system of indicators monitoring various aspects. The planning of policies on physical activity involves the participation of all members of society, including health, education, urban development, transport, sport, security, academia, and civil society. We also need to establish precise mechanisms and indicators enabling us to monitor the effective participation in physical activity in a very routine way so that we know the progress being made in different countries. And we would also support the draft resolution on this issue, enabling us to have a draft action plan to strengthen public policy to encourage physical activity. Thank you.
Philippines, you have the floor, and then Zambia.
Good morning, and thank you, Chair. We appreciate the work of the Secretariat on this report and on the draft Global Action Plan to promote physical activity for health. The draft report on physical activity for health presents in brief the rising prevalence of physical inactivity worldwide and its debilitating effects as a risk factor for NCDs and global mortality. The draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity for 2018-2030 also provides a very comprehensive list of policy actions and strategies. With this, we strongly propose that the Secretariat identifies specific low-hanging fruits or best buys that can be immediately implemented for age-specific groups in support of the draft resolution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. Zambia, to be followed by Canada. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you very much, Chair. Zambia aligns itself with a statement by Burundi on behalf of the Africa region. We commend the Secretariat for the report and the progress made on the draft action plan on physical activity. We note the information on the current situation as a reminder for the need to do more by all member states. In line with this, Zambia, for example, launched its first ever National Health Week in 2016, with physical activity for health on top of the agenda. However, we are mindful of the need for physical activity to go beyond a week-long set of activities and to become a way of life. The goal of the draft Global Action Plan of a 15% reduction in physical inactivity is, in our opinion, too modest, especially in relation to adolescents. We therefore call for a more ambitious goal, particularly targeting adolescents with corresponding resources to match. We echo the call for technical support from WHO in the implementation of action plan once finalized. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Zambia. Canada, you have the floor, and then France.
Thank you, Chair. Canada firmly believes that the Global Action Plan on Physical Activity sets the stage for a strong and integrated agenda for physical activity to be pursued by a range of partners over the next 12 years. The plan is focused and inclusive and reflects the wide range of feedback provided by member states and stakeholders. We're pleased to co-sponsor the resolution calling for its adoption, including with the revisions read into the table today. We're pleased that the plan proposes the development of physical activity programs that are appropriate for subpopulations who face barriers to good health. And finally, Chair, we encourage member states to implement the plan in ways that actively promote leadership opportunities for girls and women in sports and recreation. This is key for their physical and mental health as well as their empowerment more generally. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. France, you have the floor, and then Algeria.
Monsieur le Président.
Chairman, France welcomes the draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity 2018-2030 and pays tribute to the excellent quality of the documents prepared by the Secretariat. We fully support the proposals in the draft Global Action Plan to strengthen governance, multi-sectoral partnerships, information systems, and awareness raising. We also share the view that there needs to be a change in paradigm on physical activity. It's vital to take measures focusing on the very youngest children and then throughout the life course focusing on reducing social inequalities in this area. For many years now, France has been pursuing public health plans and programs to encourage physical activity and limit sedentary lifestyles. And we have a new National Health Strategy 2018-2022 proposed by the Ministry of Health, which focuses on that too. This year we have strengthened a partnership with the OECD in this area, and we've launched a study on the economic impact of policies to support and promote physical and sporting activities. And that demonstrates the joint determination of the Ministries of Sport and Health to better integrate the potential public policies on physical and sporting activity, as in terms of its economic impact and in terms of health prevention. France also cooperates with other international organizations in this area, and we are developing the draft global action plan in collaboration with the OECD. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Delegate from France. May I request Algeria to take the floor, to be followed by Turkey?
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chairman. This is a very brief statement to say that Algeria supports the statement made by Burundi on this agenda item. We'd also like to thank the Secretariat for an excellent report. We support the draft resolution, and that includes the amendments which have been tabled to it by Malta. We'd also like to take this opportunity to express our desire to be added to the resolution as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you, Algeria. Turkey, you have the floor, and then Jamaica.
Thank you, Chair. Turkey welcomes the report and supports the draft resolution with an amendment suggested by Malta on behalf of the European Union, and wants to add its name among the co-sponsors. It was very nice and promising for the future sessions that Secretariat determined to make us healthier by physical activity. As members of this esteemed committee, we could change our seats with alternates or advisors, but I had some concerns on the health of Dr. Tedros and Mr. Chair and the Secretariat because they had to be seated for hours without any interruption. I was one of the few supporting by acclamation the intervention of the distinguished delegate from Thailand and completely supporting the idea of being a pioneer and a role model as integrating some basic physical activity practices into our long seating sessions. We can gain these few minutes by deleting some paragraphs from our interventions mentioning what we did in our country or explaining the importance or consequences of the item we are discussing, which everybody in this room already knows and emphasized well in the official documents provided already. Secretariat gave us a small essence of what they can provide, however, not more than since. We should promote physical activity simultaneously with the healthy eating habits. If we separate the two items, it might be easy to raise funds for our activities, but we should be aware of the undue influences of some food industry players trying to undercover the role of high sugar, salt, and trans fat food products on obesity. Such a program should go hand in hand. Otherwise, promoting physical activity without any reference to nutrition will be defective. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Turkey. So finally, some sympathy for the DG and the Chair and Secretariat. I'm so glad. Thank you. I'd request Jamaica to take the floor, and then finally, Congo.
Thank you, Chair. The draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity is timely and comprehensive. The government of Jamaica has made significant strides in promoting physical activity among various sectors and groups in Jamaica. An exercise campaign was launched in April 2017 dubbed Jamaica Moves, where through fun, innovative marketing strategies, the ministry has repackaged and rebranded existing initiatives that promote physical activity in schools, workplace, communities, and health facilities. The Ministry of Health's participation, including our own Minister of Health, in many of these walks and runs over the past year has been a motivating factor to the health sector, parliamentarians, and the public at large, and it is our intention to document and share the Jamaican experience as a best practice within the regions of the Americas. Jamaica has also exposed its practitioners to training in exercise prescription, creating health zones across the country and developing guidelines and resource guides, and have engaged the Prime Minister and the entire government in this area. Having recognized the benefits of promoting physical activities, Jamaica wishes to propose an amendment to the draft action plan to include the estimated cost for implementation of the proposed actions for low, middle, and high-income countries, which will provide further guidance for member states. I thank you.
Thank you, Jamaica. Congo, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd just like to draw the attention of the interpreters to the fact that we are the Republic of the Congo, not the Democratic Republic of the Congo. On this point, we support the statement made by Burundi on behalf of the African Group. We'd like to make a couple of amendments to this, if we might. On page 3, after 8, taking into account the specific features of certain diseases, we'd like to add the following words: physical activity in the course of some NCDs should be monitored as a result of the increased risk of morbidity and even mortality. Some of our patients who participated in physical activity in schools and in training sessions have had to be taken into hospital for vascular complications, and some have even died. On page 5, action 2, after age, we would like to add, while adapting physical activity to the level of basic fitness of each individual, taking into account his or her specific medical condition. And on action 3.1, physical activity, and we'll add adapting the physical effort to the capacity of each individual. With these amendments, Chairman, we would be happy for our name to be added to the list of co-sponsors of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I see no EB members, so we move on to non-EB members and start with Indonesia, to be followed by Republic of Korea. You have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Indonesia appreciates the systematic and thorough process taken to finance the Global Action Plan on Physical Activity GAPA 2018-2030. We welcome and endorse the more active people for a healthier world vision. Indonesia has already taken an important step by promulgating a national multi-sectoral healthy lifestyle movement, which in Bahasa Indonesia is abbreviated as GERMAS, which focuses on the adoption of healthy and active lifestyle, as well as the prevention of NCDs and improving maternal and child health. As a multi-sectoral initiative, this program is carried out as a collaboration of 17 key ministries as implementing partners. GERMAS contains 3 key elements, include early detection, increasing intake of fruit, vegetable, and fish, and physical activities. All elements of the Indonesian society are the target and beneficiaries of the GERMAS movement: children, people in productive age, workers, elderly, men, women. In school, physical activity is included in the curriculum with the provision of sport classes. Also, during break time, students are encouraged to go out and play. And additionally, the Indonesian government has promoted stretching programs during working hours for employees since 2014, and exercise classes for the elderly and pregnant women. All our effort to lower the percentage of physical inactivity in adults and adolescents is done because we are convinced that they will lead to a more fit and productive society. In closing, while asserting that promoting physical activity requires the involvement of every single component at the national and local level, Indonesia joined co-sponsored the draft resolution that endorsed and welcomes GAPA 2018-2030, and we look forward to its full implementation. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, sir. We have now Republic of Korea and then Panama.
Good morning, and thank you, Mr. Chair. The Republic of Korea shares the awareness of the positive impacts of regular physical activity on health and welcome the report. We have 2 points to make. First, collective efforts among national, regional, and global levels are needed to promote physical activity for people of all ages, especially as we all know, capacities of physical activity and mobility are different between age groups. Thus, the Republic of Korea strongly suggests that WHO develop standards and guidelines for implementing appropriate physical activities by age and share them with member states. Second, The Republic of Korea is concerned with disparities among member states in measuring the prevalence of physical activities, as well as disparities in national capacities of data collecting, monitoring, and research on physical activity. Again, we urge WHO to provide guidelines for measuring the performance of physical activity promotion. We also call for continued support from WHO to help build a national framework for member states to collect data and monitor the performance of physical activity practice. Thank you.
Thank you. Panama to be followed by Ecuador.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Panama welcomes this draft plan of action, its strategic goals and normative provisions. We believe that society has a responsibility for its own health, but at the same time it is the duty of states to provide circumstances in which people can be physically active. This can be brought about through better understanding and appreciation of the value of regular physical activity. Furthermore, as states, we are responsible to create an environment which will make it easier for people to engage in physical activity to the benefit of their own health and that of their families easily throughout their lives. This plan can be put with other action already taken to speed up the implementation of policy measures related to health and safety and security. That will help too. Public and the private sector need to encourage their employees to engage in physical activity. That's a sine qua non if we're going to have an active and healthy population. Therefore, at the initiative of our President, we have brought in active pauses, such as the one we had yesterday, and that we hope will be repeated. Our children and young people need to be encouraged from the earliest possible age to avoid a sedentary lifestyle. And we can use various methods to get them away from just spending their spare time on digital devices. Guidance from the Secretariat to states will be helpful, as will technical assistance, which will make it easier for member states to implement this plan and to ensure that they follow innovative strategies and adopt instruments which have been proven to be effective in other places and which will help us to achieve the relevant SDG. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Ecuador to be followed by Peru.
Buenos días.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Ecuador has acknowledged the lack of physical activity as being one of the factors behind the increased prevalence of non-communicable diseases in Ecuador. We have been working on preventing those and promoting health to bring those risk factors down. This draft global plan of action is extremely important, and therefore we endorse it, and the same is true of the resolution submitted jointly with Thailand and another significant group of member states. Contrary to what people might think, the issue of physical activity is a complex one, and it incorporates many challenges. Targets 2 and 4, for example, may be more difficult to hit because they are closely related to political issues, and they may also have an effect on economic interests. We urge the organization and its member states to bear in mind that technical assistance and cooperation will be essential for better implementation of the measures to hit these targets and to carry out the plan in general. Political will is essential, crucial indeed as well, and that's why we call upon WHO to encourage joint strategies and alliances to implement this plan. Last but not least, we think that regular evaluation on how the plan is being implemented will be helpful, bearing in mind, of course, that various countries may apply it differently or give priority to certain measures under others. That means, of course, that the outcome will not necessarily be homogeneous or easy to compare. Thank you.
Thank you. Peru to be followed by Argentina.
Gracias, Presidente.
Chairman, thank you, and good morning, everybody. We're very grateful to the Secretariat for having prepared the documentation on this agenda item. In Peru, we've been taking various types of action to promote physical activity, which goes hand in hand with encouraging people to eat healthily. This is part of a multi-sectoral strategy to bring down the risk factors behind chronic diseases related to bad nutrition and the lack of physical activity. We support the prioritized list of normative measures in the plan and the principles which guide them. We are strongly committed to ensuring that everybody can have access in safe circumstances to engaging in physical activity as part of their daily lives, because this will improve not only their individual health but the health of their community as well. With that, we support the plan and the draft resolution. Thank you.
Thank you. Argentina, you have the floor, and then USA.
Chairman, thank you. Argentina has noted and expresses its thanks for the submission of this report. We note the issue of cutting down vulnerability and improving equity and encouraging physical activity as part of people's daily lives, as well as ensuring policy consistency and avoiding conflict of interest. We think this plan will be of great use to the Ministry of Health of our country because its goals are fully in line with the concepts and principles outlined here. As specific suggestions in order to strengthen the plan of action, we propose the following. Insofar as possible, giving priority to goals and recommendations which are the most specific, which can be quantified and measured, these relating, of course, as to how to implement the measures recommended in practice. We'd also suggest strengthening the initiative and focusing on the paradigm of physical activity and health instead of sport and health. Last but not least, we recommend that the measures taken be assessed on the basis of evidence. That way we could also select the most effective and cost-efficient measures. Especially this is important for countries with reduced financial resources who may not be able to apply all the measures advocated at one and the same time. Thank you.
Thank you. United States of America, you have the floor, to be followed by Australia.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The United States appreciates WHO's efforts to develop this draft global action plan on physical activity. The United States supports the plan's goal to reduce the prevalence of physical inactivity and welcomes the plan's call for multi-sectoral and multi-stakeholder action. We find the plan improved in relation to the 2017 consultation draft and wish to offer several recommendations to refine the draft further ahead of its consideration by the 71st World Health Assembly. Throughout the text, obligations and rights-related language should be edited for accuracy. Specifically, paragraphs 17 and 24 should be edited to accurately reflect their source and context, and paragraphs 29 and 31 should be consistent with the original wording of the 2030 Agenda. The United States does not recognize concepts described on pages 5, 7, 9, and 11 as rights. While access to sport, quality physical education, and safe places and spaces can be practical approaches to further the progressive realization of the right to the highest attainable standard of health, they should not be inaccurately characterized as rights. Each country will determine the best approach to support increasing physical activity. If retained in the appendix, we recommend reviewing references to marketing of foods and non-alcoholic beverages for accuracy and acknowledging the need to take into account, as appropriate, variations in member states' existing legislation and policies. We request clarification on whether the WHO strategy on the use of fiscal policies for health noted will be available to member states ahead of the World Health Assembly. We encourage inclusive technical consultations as WHO carries out work to finalize the monitoring and evaluation framework and the set of process and impact indicators. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, US. Australia, you have the floor, to be followed by Switzerland.
Thank you, Chair. Australia commends the Secretariat for the development of the draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity. We welcome a renewed focus on this important issue. We commend Thailand for their efforts in drafting the proposed resolution and support its adoption. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Australia. Switzerland, you have the floor, and then Spain.
Thank you, Chairman. Switzerland would like to be added to the list of co-sponsors for this resolution. She welcomes the opportunity to contribute to the Global Plan of Action on Physical Activity. Thank you.
Thank you very much again, Switzerland. We move on to Spain, followed by Bangladesh.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Spain endorses what has been said by Malta, speaking on behalf of the European Union. We believe that physical inactivity is a major risk factor for early mortality from non-communicable diseases. Regular physical activity, on the other hand, is related to lesser risks for breast and colon cancer, cardiovascular disease and other NCDs, and lives to a better life and a longer life in general. We've been encouraging physical activity for many years, and as part of our preventive health strategy, we are taking a whole series of actions to ensure that our national recommendations on physical activity, the time people spend in front of a screen, and a sedentary lifestyle are implemented, and we're focusing particularly on young people and older people so as to try and increase life expectancy in good health and reduce disability and the prevalence of NCDs. We would like to see healthy and active aging. Spain fully supports the plan of action and is co-sponsoring the resolution, including acceptance and endorsement of the amendment proposed by Malta. Thank you.
Thank you. Bangladesh, you have the floor, and then India.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We recognize physical activity as an essential element to reduce morbidity and mortality caused by NCDs, including mental disorders. Urbanization, motorization, and sedentary lifestyles are creating environment unconducive to physical activity, particularly in urban areas. NCDs and physical activity have been prioritized in the health policy architecture of Bangladesh. The National Population Nutrition Strategic Investment Plan 2016-2021 recognized the importance of promoting regular exercise among all age groups, and that schools, businesses, and local authorities need to look at ways to make exercise more accessible to people living in crowded environments and provide opportunities for people through access to open spaces. The Multi-Sectoral Action Plan for NCDs 2018 to 2021, which is in the process of adoption, describes prioritized actions for physical activity, including adopting and advocating national guidelines on physical activity, advocating to town and urban planners for urban design, which promotes physical activity, and conducting mass media campaigns. We feel that technical assistance to implement the existing national policies in alignment with the proposed Global Action Plan on Physical Activity would be valuable, particularly giving emphasis on the following. First, operationalizing existing and new multi-sectoral coordination mechanisms and ensuring accountability. Second, applying equity analysis in design, implementation, and monitoring of programs to reduce gender, rural, urban, and socio-economic inequalities in physical activity prevalence. And finally, urban planning and design to promote physical activity. With these, we support the draft Global Action Plan along with the resolution proposed by Thailand. I thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Bangladesh. India, you have the floor, to be followed by Finland.
India has participated in the regional consultations to draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity in August 2017. National Multi-Sectoral Action Plan for Prevention and Control of NCDs is developed to guide multi-sectoral efforts towards attaining the national NCD targets. The plan has identified specific areas requiring multi-sectoral action to promote physical activity for health. Specific communication campaign and mass participation initiatives in public spaces taken up, including promotion of yoga, which supports creation of an active society. India has launched a national program for development sports with the target of covering 200 million children to improve physical activity among children. Multiple media platforms, including social media, are being utilized to improve awareness about healthy lifestyles, including promoting physical activity for health. India is committed to undertaking promoting physical activity and support the initiative and the resolution in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, India. Finland, you have the floor.
Mr. Chair, Finland aligns itself with a statement by Malta on behalf of the European Union and statement by Sweden on behalf of Nordic and Baltic countries. Finland would like to be added to the list of co-sponsors of the resolution. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Finland. We don't have any member states willing to intervene now. Yes, we have Germany. You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, physical activity contributes to decrease the burden of NCDs, and therefore Germany strongly supports this resolution, and we would like to be added to the list of co-sponsors. Thank you.
Thank you, Germany. We'll move on to observer states, and Palestine, you have the floor. And then
Shukran, Sayyid Rais.
Thank you, Chairman. And good morning, everybody. We're grateful to the Secretariat for having provided us with this report on physical activity, given the importance of the subject. We promote physical activity to improve health through educational programs and also through a health plan of action. It's an effective way, we know, of fighting against non-communicable diseases. We've also adopted an anti-obesity plan. At the same time, physical activity is included in that. Ministries, not only the Ministry of Health but others as well, are involved in implementing the anti-obesity program through inexpensive measures such as encouraging physical activity. The Education Ministry in Palestine is working to improve child nutrition too. In conclusion, Chairman, we are continuing with all the efforts we can possibly make in the occupied Palestinian territories to improve health, including, but of course not limited to, increasing physical activity among the population. Apart from anything else, this will help to bring down the cost of treating NCDs, and we hope we'll be able to continue with these efforts with your support and assistance. Thank you.
Thank you, Palestine. Now we move on to non-state actors. We'll start with International Federation of Medical Students Association. You have floor for 2 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Chair. The IFMSA would like to express support for the draft Global Action Plan on Physical Activity. We particularly appreciate the holistic approach to the problem of inactivity across multiple channels, including building awareness, multi-sector engagement, and creating favorable environments to promote healthier lifestyles. As medical students, we especially value the emphasis placed on strengthening workforce capacity across sectors in order to create inclusive and equitable opportunities for an active society. We know that 81% of adolescents do not meet global recommendations for physical activity and are thus extremely vulnerable to resultant negative health consequences. We see this as a crucial matter of importance in the well-being of future generations. To ensure that the needs of adolescents are correctly identified, we call for the continued involvement of youth-led organizations in the implementation of a global action plan, particularly as this is an area we are already engaged in and advocate for through various activities and projects across 127 countries in the world. The IFMSA would like to recommend an emphasis on promoting and establishing healthy lifestyles in early childhood and adolescence, particularly in underserved communities, to offer them the environment and opportunities to create healthy and enjoyable physical habits for life. Thank you.
Thank you. Union for International Cancer Control, you have the floor, to be followed by World Health Federation.
I wish to note that this statement is supported by the NCD Alliance, the International Society for Physical Activity and Health, and the International Union for Health Promotion and Education. We commend WHO and leadership from Southeast Asia region member states for the development of a comprehensive action plan on physical activity. As noted in the EB reports on physical activity, NCDs, and the draft GPW 13, physical activity is a key modifier of health, particularly for people at risk of and living with NCDs, with strong causal relationships documented for diabetes, cancer, cardiovascular, and lung diseases. With countries alarmingly off track to achieve global NCD targets, the plan's proposed outcome target of a 15% relative reduction in inactivity is a necessarily ambitious increase from the existing 10% inactivity reduction target.
Chairman, I'm sorry, but could speakers please slow down? Thank you.
Will be
may I request you to speak slowly, please?
will be crucial to promote and enable physical activity across all ages, abilities, demographics and geographies. We underscore the severe inadequacy of existing human and financial resources for physical activity promotion and programme implementation, and welcome the plan's recommendations to strengthen dedicated financing mechanisms. We commend insistence on ensuring that partnerships with the private sector are informed by WHO recommendations on restrictions of marketing of unhealthy foods and non-alcoholic beverages and the Commission on Ending Childhood Obesity. Similar cautionary principles should be extended to other potentially incompatible partnerships, such as those with alcohol, gambling and fossil fuel industries, whose products and services drive modifiable risk factors and contradict sustainable development principles. In 2017, Dr. Tedros attracted enthusiastic support on social media for a Move for Health themed activity at the 2018 World Health Assembly. We encourage partners identified in the draft action plan, led by WHO, to collaborate on such a campaign and hereby commit to support the NCD community to achieve this.
Thank you. World Heart Foundation, you have the floor, and then World Cancer Research Fund International. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The World Heart Federation thanks WHO for its report and commends the latest draft of the Global Action Plan on Physical Activity and its strategic objectives. Physical inactivity increases the relative risk of coronary artery disease, stroke and hypertension by 45%, 60% and 30% respectively, with the number of annual CVD deaths projected to rise to over 22 million in 2030 on current trends. A collective response is urgently needed. We therefore commend the action plan's practical recommendations for collective action by different stakeholders and its clear positioning within the context of the SDGs. In particular, we strongly support the revised target of a 15% relative reduction in physical inactivity among adults and adolescents, which builds on pre-existing targets in the Global Monitoring Framework for NCDs. We look forward to the development of process and impact indicators later this year and offer 2 recommendations in this regard. Firstly, in addition to an indicator measuring the number of countries with national multi-sectoral action plans on physical activity, we suggest measuring the number of countries with a national budget allocated to the financing of this plan and the number of countries with a designated finance unit responsible for its implementation and subsequent monitoring. These indicators would help to focus efforts on making national plans for physical activity operational. Secondly, we note that readers may differ in their interpretation and definition of the word safe with regard to safe access to physical activity programs and public areas, an issue highlighted by the gender disparity in physical activity between men and women. We suggest that the Secretariat include a definition of and indicator for safety under Strategic Objective 2. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. World Cancer Research Fund International, and then finally Global Health Council. You have the floor, World Cancer Research Fund.
This statement is delivered on behalf of World Cancer Research Fund International and the World Obesity Federation. There is strong evidence to show that being physically active directly protects against several cancers, as well as protecting against overweight and obesity. Being overweight or obese is linked to an increased risk of 11 cancers, as well as diabetes and cardiovascular diseases. Worldwide, nearly 1/3 of adults are not physically active enough, and countries are off track to meet the global NCD targets. As such, we commend the plan's proposed target of a 15% relative reduction in inactivity. Physical inactivity is a leading risk factor for NCDs, and we are delighted with this milestone plan. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Global Health Council, you have the floor.
On behalf of Global Health Council, supported by its member organizations, the American Academy of Pediatrics, which represents 66,000 pediatricians in the U.S. and around the world, and NCD Child, we welcome WHO's attention to physical activity and concur with the observation in the Director General's report that significant disparities hamper equitable access to safe, accessible, affordable, and appropriate spaces and places in which to be physically active. To this end, we recommend that schools facilitate participation by supporting gender-sensitive athletic programs and activities, and that awareness campaigns promote or tie into educational efforts that support health literacy and empower people to make healthy, informed decisions for themselves. Promotion of safe physical activity helps prevent childhood obesity and injuries, contributing to the NCD prevention agenda too. Local governments should invest in infrastructure improvements that provide opportunities for physical activity, such as parks and recreational facilities, mitigate traffic dangers such as pedestrian crossings, sidewalks, and bicycle routes, and otherwise reduce the anxieties of parents about their children's safety, which is associated with reduced physical activity. Thank you.
Thank you, Global Health Council. We are done with all the statements from members and non-member states. I would now request Dr. Exlord, ADG, Non-Communicable Diseases and Mental Health. You know, my kids still think that playing video games is very vigorous exercise. So I'd like to record your statement and take it back to them. So, floor is with you, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving me the floor. And the Secretariat would like to thank the distinguished delegates for their comments and for their guidelines. And thank you very much for your examples of the multi-sectoral work that you have and activities in your countries on the physical activity. It's really a very good example that could be implemented in the other countries also. And let me highlight a couple of points. It's very important. First of all, I would like to thank the Thailand for their hosting the International Conference on Physical Activity, which was in the 2016, and also for the chairing informal drafting group of the resolution. Thank you very much, and thank you all co-sponsors for your support in this resolution. My first point is related to the process used to develop the action plan. And I wish to thank all member states for participation in the extensive consultation process which was undertaken. And I also wish to thank the many non-state actors which provide their inputs. These inputs have made this a current legal action plan to promote physical activity like the world has never seen before. And it has become a very concrete action plan that is fully implemented by EU member states. My second point is related to the request made to the Secretariat to update the document before it will be submitted during the World Health Assembly, and to ensure the alignments and consistently with the existing document. We have already noted everything, this request from the member states, and we will proceed accordingly. My third point is related to the member states. Working together through the WHO to develop this action plan is just 5% of our work. And we have 95% of work to go ahead and to implement this action plan in your countries. And promoting physical activity, it is the universal goal which involves all the world. So WHO and the UN Task Force for NCD stands ready to provide strategic support and to help countries to implement this plan. So my last point relates to the walking the talk. It's great to see that all delegates take a 3-minute physical activity break during the agenda that we have. And I like also to dance. And I'm sure that during the World Health Assembly, we will organize a lot of physical activity events, and you will support and go with us. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, madam. I would request DG to take the floor.
Thank you. Just 2 points. First of all, thank you so much for your inputs and guidance on this. And second, one thing I would like to underline is we have many best practices. There are countries who have already moved ahead or pulled ahead. So while having the plan, we will also try to identify these best practices and share it with them. For instance, one of the practices I witnessed myself directly is in Brunei. Every weekend, the whole country actually gets into a standstill. And the capital city was completely out of traffic, any traffic, and people were moving, any kind of movement. Some of them were running, some of them were cycling, others were doing Zumba in the streets. So we can identify those And we can create a movement that can really engulf the whole world. So we have best practices. So let's learn from those countries who have already pulled ahead. And the other example I know firsthand is Rwanda, like Brunei. So we can best benchmark those practices and share it with you, and it could be part of the plan of action. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. We have many practices, best practices that we can learn from. And the second item I would like to underline is, as what Thailand has repeatedly reminded us, WHO should be a model, should lead by example. And many others have also underlined that. And that's why we're starting from the next assembly, an annual event. It's a 5K run for those who can run, but all will participate. You will have cycling and everything. And the next will be, as what Svetlana said, it will be on May 20th. That's the eve of the opening of our May 21 WHA. And this will be an annual event, but we don't want to keep it in Geneva. Geneva every year will act as a nucleus, but we want to send out a message globally why movement is important for our health. So it will be an annual event, and for the first one, we will invite popular or famous athletes from the world, and we will approach actually countries from here to help us with that. But I think that leading by example is very important. So preparing the plan of action is one thing, but leading by example is another thing. So we will come back to you for cooperation, especially on the May 20 activity, that we want it to be an annual event and lead by example. So come prepared, come ready to run. Everybody will run or move, whatever move they can. But we will start it on May 20, and we're making all preparations. And Thailand is already in and supporting, and we invite other countries. It's a voluntary one. Anything you can help with May 20, but we will do a formal invitation to contribute anything you can to make it as successful as possible and a good example for the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, DG.
Thank you, DG. So we'll start looking for running shoes for World Health Assembly. So as I see no more comments, I take that the board wishes to take note of the report. Is the board now ready to consider the draft regulation contained in EB 142/conference/3? There has been a number of amendments, only one amendment, and I'll ask Secretariat to read it out.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A proposed amendment for a new OP 5.5 to read, to update the Global Recommendations on Physical Activity for Health 2010. I repeat, a new OP 5.5 to update the Global Recommendations on Physical Activity for Health 2010. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. So is the board now ready to adopt the draft resolution contained in EB 142/conference/3 as amended? I see no objection. The resolution is therefore adopted as amended. This concludes the board consideration of sub-item 4.2. However, in order to celebrate the adoption of this resolution, we're going to do some physical activity. So I would request all of you again, we have a better video this time, which has better music and some difficult moves now. So we are progressing on the ladder of moves. So may we have the video, please? We have another dancing.
Stay healthy.
Oh la la, that's very good. That's very good. And a bit easier, as the chair said.
Yeah. We are improving every day. I am sure by when we move out, we'll be much better. So we move next agenda.
We will be good.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you once again for joining us for the physical activity. And I believe in future, all those who are watching us all around the world should also take this break with us. Before we open up the next agenda, I would like to take this opportunity to congratulate India on its Republic Day. Today is India's Republic Day, and we congratulate you on your Republic Day. So with this, I'll reopen item 3.7 and ask the chair of informal group to give feedback on the progress so far. So Colombia, you have the floor to apprise the EB.
Muy buenos días.
A very good morning, Chairman. We hope that this very positive spirit following this excellent physical activity will take us to consensus on this item. Last night we held some very constructive consultations, and I think we've come with some good news this morning. We've reached an agreement on 2 paragraphs, and I hope you all have the text that the Secretariat has circulated. And last night there were copies circulated to all focal points. Paragraphs 2 and 3 we need to look at in particular. What is in green means that there has been an agreement reached on those paragraphs, and there were still 2 paragraphs that remain open. As you can see, what we did last night was that those recommendations that were of the Secretariat were separated out in 2 and 3, and those recommendations of the panel addressed to Member States are addressed in paragraph 1 and 1 bis. In the morning, we worked with Dr. Ray from Malta, who I would like to thank as well. He's put in a great deal of work to see if it was possible here in plenary to reach consensus. So we have some amendments for those 2 paragraphs that remain open now. And if you'll allow me, I'm going to read those out very slowly so that you can take note of them. They're not very difficult or complex, and hopefully we'll be able to reach a final agreement on the decision. So for paragraph 1.
To English. So I'm going to read the amendments that we're going to propose to get a solution for the paragraph 1. So we say to each member states to implement, as appropriate, and taking into account national context. So we move the last part to the first line. So I will repeat again, as appropriate, and taking into account national context. 3 recommendations of the review panel that address it to member states and consistent with the GSPOA. So we take out the bracket. We take out, the phrase that are. So we delete completely that phrase. I will repeat again. To urge member states to implement as appropriate and taking into account national context 3 recommendations of the review panel that address to member states and consistent with GSPOA. This is an amendment for the paragraph 1. For the paragraph 1bis, we propose the following amendment. To urge member states to further discuss 3 recommendations or the review panel not emanating from the GSPOA. So in concrete, we just proposing 1 phrase is to urge member states to further discuss. Further discuss is the new. The recommendations of the review panel not emanating from the GSPOA. So I hope, Mr. Chairman, with these concrete proposals that we have worked very hard with my colleague from Malta, and we try to share with some key partners. We know that this resolution, this decision is in the interest to all member states. We can achieve an agreement in the plenary now. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all of you for your very constructive disposition to discuss this.
Thank you, Columbia, and I'd like to thank all the informal group members, particularly the 2 chairs. Would Malta like to give in some input?
No, I think my colleague has expressed the feelings, but there was a very solid spirit of cooperation between all member states. And although it was hard, but we got there. And my optimistic tone yesterday, I think, proved right, because we did bring forward, hopefully, a positive result. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta. And we should look at it in the spirit of cooperation and optimism. So we would like the EB members to have their thoughts on this, if any. Right. So, Brazil, you have the floor, madam.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I wanted to echo what you just said. I think Malta and Colombia did a superb work. And I'm here, I ask for the floor to thank them for their work and also thank all the members and non-members of this EB who participated in this effort. I think we have a good text before us. It's not by far the preferred text that Brazil would argue for in this EB, but it's a good compromise. We can move forward with that. And I believe that we all, and at least Brazil did, participate in this with good faith, spirit of compromise, and sensitive to other members' concerns. We would like very much to be reciprocated at one point in time when we need to further discuss these issues. So we are happy with this, and we call for the immediate approval of this point of decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. You have the floor again, madam.
Point that in 1 bis, when we are talking about further discussion of recommendations of the review panel that do not emanating from GSPOA, for us, for Brazil, and I want this to be on record, we are talking about recommendations 4, 27, and 28. So we know the universe that we are supposed to discuss further. Thank you.
Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. I was not in the night session yesterday, and my staff asked me what would be our position. And I told him that you go with whatever Brazil is. So this morning is the same. We go with Brazil.
Wonderful. Malta, you have the floor.
Just for clarification, the paragraphs 4, 27, and 28, I don't know whether a revised document with the numbers has been issued, but refer to the paper in 1/14, is not numbered. So we gave a number to the paragraphs starting from the first paragraph of the recommendation, from the first recommendation being 1, and sequentially recommendation by recommendation being given a number. So we're talking of if it's 4, it's the 4th bullet or the 4th paragraph in the document. If it's 27, it's the 27th paragraph in the document, just for clarification purposes for member states.
Right, thank you very much. So we're very happy for this positive approach, and we give the floor to USA. USA, you have the floor.
Chair. Appreciate everyone's hard work over the last day or so to find consensus. Really appreciate Malta and Colombia's work with all member states. One thing we just wanted to note that there was one minor word change in the final version that Colombia read out that we it was a bit different than what we agreed to. It deleted a verb in that paragraph 1. However, we can go along with this recent version as long as the understanding is clear that paragraph 1 applies only to those recommendations that fall within the original GSPOA. But with that comment and consideration, we are prepared to go along as well.
Thank you, USA. Algeria, sir, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. Algeria welcomes the constructive discussion and the spirit of compromise shown by member states and non-EB members. That was shown in the informal discussions yesterday and this morning. We welcome the efforts of the 2 co-chairs, Colombia and Malta, for their leadership and for the way in which they steered the negotiations. Chairman, we wish to support the draft decision that was read out by Colombia. We'll just point out that the recommendations requiring further discussion are recommendations 4, 27, and 28. And Algeria would also like to be a co-sponsor of the draft decision on this item. Thank you.
Netherlands.
Thank you, Chair, and it was interesting to hear that Thailand has such easy instructions, because we always read carefully what is presented by us, by the colleagues from Brazil or others, and but this case, I think we have heard a very constructive contribution from all the colleagues in the drafting group, and I think that the chairs did excellent work in preparing this paper for the board. So also from the side of the Netherlands, we are ready to support this decision. Thank you.
Honorable Delegate from Iraq, and then Benin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Really, Iraq will support what have been reached, and thank you for the Malta and for the Colombia for this really hard work, and for all those here. We have been also with them, and we really welcome what have been mentioned as regard a report on the progress. This is very, very important in order to look through, and thank you very much for that work.
Thank you, sir. The respected delegate from Benin, please take the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd also like to express our thanks to you to begin with for the excellent way in which you're chairing our work, and to Colombia for having introduced this draft decision to us this morning. Personally speaking, I wasn't in the consultations yesterday, but my delegation has kept an eye on the work, and the report made to us this morning does, I think, indicate that agreement has been reached. This is a very important issue, so that's good, and we'd like to offer our congratulations to all the members who contributed to bringing positions together. We'd also like to say that Benin welcomes the open-minded attitude that appears to have prevailed, and we support the draft decision which has emerged as a result of that. We'd also urge that that open-minded and understanding attitude continue to prevail, because that will help all of us to work together to implement and properly follow up on recommendations which emerge from these meetings. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Allow me to give some credit to the physical exercise for the open-mindedness which has been created. So we wish to see that open-mindedness in the whole of the executive board. Congo, sir, you have the floor, and then Mexico.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be very brief. We attended the discussions yesterday, but not this morning. But the important thing is that we welcome consensus and we support the draft decision as it has been presented to us this morning. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mexico, you have the floor.
Chairman, thank you. Very briefly, to thank the Secretariat for being very sensitive on an issue that we've been discussing, as we all know, for many, many years. Thank you for helping us to make progress and get to the point when we could agree this draft decision. Thank you obviously also to Colombia and Malta, because they've done tremendous work yesterday in bringing us all together on this. Last but not least, thank you to the other delegations who participated actively from the beginning of the discussions. At the beginning, it didn't seem that we were going to be able to reach agreement. We have, and we are very grateful for the constructive attitude taken by those delegations who had to listen to and take on board the concerns of others in order to get to a point where we could reach consensus. Thank you.
Thank you, madam. Swaziland, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to all colleagues for the progress made on this issue. Maybe this one is for the Secretariat, if at all is okay to do, to please number the paragraphs that are in the document that has been referred to for future reference. Thank you.
Thank you, Swaziland. May I now ask the Secretariat to read the final script so that we present it to the board for approval?
Thank you. Just before I read the script, to come back to the point raised by Malta and Swaziland, yes, the paper will be reissued today with the numbering as has been requested. So thank you for that suggestion, and we will accommodate. If I now turn back to the draft resolution to be amended as follows. Paragraph 1, to urge, excuse me, to urge member states to implement, as appropriate, and taking into account national contexts, the recommendations of the review panel that are addressed to member states and consistent with GSPOA. 1 bis, to urge member states further discuss the recommendations of the review panel not emanating from the GSPOA. Thank you, Chair.
So, is the board now ready to adopt the draft decision contained in EB 142/14, Addendum 1, as amended? I see no objections, so the decision is therefore adopted as amended. Let me congratulate everybody for this very important decision which has been taken just now, and the inputs of all the member states, particularly Colombia and Malta, for leading the process. I would give the floor to Brazil.
I'll be nice, okay? I just wanted to pay homage to Dr. Ray. I understand he's not coming back to DCB, and I think he has been a superb president, and he has had an opportunity, thanks to you, to chair this group with Haiti, work that we need to recognize and be very thankful for. So I call for a round of applause to Mr. Ray. Dr. Ray.
Thank you, Brazil, for echoing the sentiments of everybody. This concludes the board's consideration of sub-item 3.7. Sorry. Thailand, you have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Chair. I will not be long because I don't like the night session. But I want to reiterate that we, in the last Health Assembly, resolved to extend GSPOA 108 actions till 2020. So this resolution only allow us or urge us or push us to prioritize on those. It doesn't mean that we reduce from 108 just to this one, because the previous resolution still there.
Thank you for your always wise input. So are we moving on to which session now? So let us now turn to another important matter, the item 3.1, Draft 13th General Program of Work 2019-2023. As you know, we adopted the resolution under this item yesterday. The resolution is contained in document EB 142 Rev 2, which is now available. In addition, the Secretariat has produced a revised draft GPW taking into account all the comments provided during the last session, which, when this item was discussed. The revision is contained in document EB 142/3 Rev 2, which will be transmitted to World Health Assembly for consideration. First, I ask Secretariat to make a comment, and then I will open the discussion. Yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to alert delegates to a typographical error on paper EB 142 Rev R2. On the footnote, it currently reads document EB 142/Rev 1. That, of course, should read document EB 142/3 Rev 2. Please just replace 1 with 2. There's typographical error. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Tim. And as we know that very extensive discussions and then on amendment discussion and amendments have already taken place on the GPW, the draft GPW. So it is here for the board for its approval. And the approval is actually meant to be transmitted it to World Health Assembly, where there's always an option to open it up again. So are there any comments, inputs on this? Yeah. So as I see no comments, so may we consider that the GPW is adopted for transmission to World Health Assembly? I see no objections, so it is decided. This concludes. Let me thank and congratulate the DG, the Secretariat, and everybody sitting in this room who had been participating in this discussion, and those not sitting in this room but have been participating in this process for the last 6 months. And this concludes the board's consideration of sub-item 4.2 of, 3.1 of its agenda. We're going pretty well. So let's move on to, which one is next? 4.5. We have the, we'll open up again another pending item, which is item 3.5. Can you give me the figures? If you remember, this was discussed earlier with the health, environment, and climate change, and it is contained in document EB 142/12. There were certain amendments and which were circulated that day, and on the request of some members to give them more time to consider these amendments, we decided to suspend the item, and so it is brought back for your consideration. So may I propose that the board is now ready to consider the draft decision contained in document EB 142/12 as contained in paragraph 37 as amended. Malta, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Concerning the draft decision on health, environment and climate change, in EB 142/conf/6, the EU and its member states are largely in agreement with the proposed amendments. However, we would like to propose a few additional amendments. The contents of the 3 decisions by the CBD in PP1 have not been considered by the governing bodies of WHO, and therefore we propose to delete them. That is, from the words "as well as decisions" all the way to and including the words "across sectors." In OP1, we propose a few words to be changed to address health effects of climate change simultaneously in both small island developing states and in other vulnerable states. We propose the word "initially" to be replaced by the word "both." The word "subsequently" to be deleted. The word "settings" to be replaced by the word "states." Should you like, I could read the full paragraphs as they would be when amended.
Please, madam, we request you to read the paragraph.
Let's read. Taking note of the report on health, environment and climate change, the commitment by the Director General to address health effects of climate change in small island developing states and other vulnerable settings as platforms within the draft 13th General Programme of Work 2019 to 2023, and the launch of that initiative at the 23rd session of the Conference of the Parties to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, in brackets Bonn, Germany, 6 to 17 November 2017. Also welcoming the United Nations Environment Assembly Resolution, UNEP/EA3/L8/Revision 1 on Environment and Health, decided to request the Director General to develop as a priority and in consultation with Member States and other stakeholders as appropriate, and in coordination also with the regional offices, a draft action plan for the platforms to address health effects of climate change, both in small island developing states and in other vulnerable states, and to submit the draft action plan for consideration by the 72nd World Health Assembly in May 2019 through the Executive Board at its 144th session in January 2019. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta, and we request any other board members for their inputs on these proposed changes. Fiji, you have the floor, sir.
I'm sure members won't be surprised to hear me coming back to just express concern with the second proposed amendment in terms of the changing of the wording, basically removing the idea of initially and subsequently. I think the point was made a day or 2 days ago that the flagship programme, as we understand it, is not actually diverting resources or removing resources from non-small island developing state settings. It's merely allocating marginal additional investment. Therefore, the proposed sequencing here doesn't actually imply any loss of resource to other states or settings. And I think we also heard what I felt was actually a very passionate intervention from the Director General himself, backed up by the ADG, emphasising the significance and urgency of this issue for the community of small island developing states, and the fact that we really can't afford to delay action in this area. I think also the amendment was certainly supported, the original wording from Fiji was also supported by my distinguished colleague from the Dominican Republic, and I would also be interested to hear what Jamaica, as the other third small island developing state in this forum, has to say on this matter. Thank you, Chair.
We'll request Mexico and then Jamaica, and then we'll come back to Malta. Mexico, you have the floor.
Chairman, thank you. Mexico is the author of the original text that's been amended in the first amendment by the European Union. We're ready to go along with the European Union amendment in PP1. Thank you.
Jamaica.
Thank you, Chair. We support Fiji in the statement that was made a short while ago to say that we believe that the word initially should remain.
New Zealand.
It was to support Fiji in its submission as well.
Algeria.
Chairman, thank you. There's just a certain ambiguity I'd like to get rid of. We'd like to add a definition so that we can really understand what we're talking about when we use the phrase vulnerable settings. What exactly does that mean? Thank you.
Brazil.
Thank you, Chair. Just, I have no comments on the draft itself, but as mentioned by Algeria, we would appreciate more clarity on a definition of vulnerable settings or states as proposed by the EU. I don't know whether here at the resolution or during the drafting of the plan of action that will be in consultation with the states. I think calling a state vulnerable, it's something that we should be very careful about. Thank you.
Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Chairman. We'd like to reiterate our support to Fiji. I think we did make that point earlier. Thank you.
Canada.
Chair, just to say that Canada aligns itself with the position of Fiji and prefers the original amendment that was made.
France.
Chairman, thank you. Two comments. The first, on the introductory paragraph, when we talk about the commitment by the Director General, since the beginning of this Executive Board, we've adjusted the general program of work a little bit, and therefore I think the heading here needs to be the same as that which is now in the general program of work. I'm talking about the platforms, the reference to small island developing states and other vulnerable settings. We need to be consistent between the wording here and the wording in the general program of work. That was my first comment. My second is as follows. On taking into account initially small island developing states and subsequently other vulnerable settings. I've heard what's been said over the last 2 days, and I've heard the position of Fiji. I can understand, but I don't think it's sufficiently clear, and that's really why we cannot really make chronological amendments of this kind. We don't really know when we'll be able to take the other states into account. So putting this chronologically, as far as we're concerned at least, isn't the right way to do it, because we just don't know when we'll be able to go from the small island developing states and look at other vulnerable states or those in other vulnerable settings. After all, everybody needs their concerns to be taken into account. That's why we know we need a solution to this, but we'd like to find a solution where we have the approach taken to the two groups simultaneously. Thank you.
Iraq.
Chairperson, really we support Fiji about what they have said, and I want also to recline to what have been said by the Brazil here as regards the vulnerable groups, and this is very important in order to be delineated well and to be really also ascertained for the what is we meaning by this vulnerable groups, because this is very important issue. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
New Zealand, you have the floor again.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It was two questions, or one potentially a proposal for discussion. One would be that the context of the recommendation would not, given the discussion about what is a vulnerable setting, that simply saying a draft action plan for platforms to address health effects of climate change initially in small island developing states and removing the section on vulnerable settings and to submit the draft action plan delivers the same thing, resolves the sort of uncertainty about vulnerable states, and is supportable on the basis that the environmental projects that have already been funded, only 2 of 30 odd are actually in small island developing states, and so there is a kind of equity issue here. The second question was in the second paragraph, with special attention to the work environment. We're unsure what that means exactly. We thought it might be about occupational safety, but would seek clarity from our distinguished colleagues from Sri Lanka.
Sri Lanka, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the comment. And of course, the intention of this proposed, the intention or rather objective of the proposal is to emphasize the importance of the occupational safety, but it seems to us that this is a bit out of context and we are having second thoughts on the proposal, and we wish to withdraw this, our proposal and our amendment. And of course, we regret any inconvenience caused. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Can we get back to Malta with expectation of some flexibility in the context of the discussions?
If the Secretariat can assure us that the work is also to include vulnerable settings, then we can be flexible. Our concern is that if the focus is on small island developing states, then it would never get to the other vulnerable settings. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Malta. We can assure you that, because that's what I said actually in my statement. All are affected, so we will work with everybody. Some are more affected than others, so we will focus on those. So we will do, as you suggested, to give our commitment to all, but to focus on the most vulnerable, which are the SIDS. Hopefully you will remember during my campaign also that was it was a very tailored approach I was proposing then, and which was welcomed actually, the SIDS initiative during the campaign, of course. So I hope we're on the same page.
Thank you, DG, for that clarification and commitment. Fiji?
Thank you, Chair. Just again to appreciate the DG's intervention there, but also to just to make sure we are all clear what we're talking about now. Fiji would be very happy to go with the wording proposed by New Zealand, which seems very elegantly to address the concerns raised about both the timing issue raised by France, but also the definitional issue raised by a couple of other board members. So Fiji would be very supportive of the, as I say, the more elegant wording proposed by my colleague from New Zealand. Thank you.
Malta, do you agree with this elegant wording?
We're just waiting for the exact text. Please, could you read it out again, please?
Yeah, New Zealand, it's a request for you to read it again, please.
To develop as a priority and in consultation with member states and other stakeholders as appropriate, and in coordination also with the regional offices, a draft action plan for the platforms to address health effects of climate change, initially in small island developing states, and to submit the draft action plan for consideration by the 72nd World Health Assembly in May 2019 through the Executive Board at its 144th session in January. It's a whopper of a sentence, but it was anyway.
Thank you, New Zealand. Malta.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think we are flexible to accept New Zealand's proposal. Thank you.
Wonderful. So we're making some real progress here. Would you like to read it again, or that's...
I'd actually like Stuart to read again because I didn't get it, I'm sorry.
From an editorial setting, it's the removal of the words "and subsequently in other settings" from that sentence. But I'm happy to read the whole thing again. To develop as a priority and in consultation with member states and other stakeholders as appropriate, and in coordination also with the regional offices, a draft action plan for the platforms to address health effects of climate change, initially in small island developing states, and to submit the draft action plan for consideration by the 72nd World Health Assembly in May 2019, through the Evaluation Board at its 144th session in January 2019.
Thank you, New Zealand. May I now propose that is the board ready to adopt the draft decision contained in document EB 142/12, contained in paragraph 37 as amended? Brazil.
I heard the evaluation board, but I guess it's the executive board. Just to be clear on that point, we are not creating another body. Thank you.
And unfortunately, my brain was not fully engaged. It should have been executive board.
I would request the Secretariat to read it just for the record. Sorry. Algeria, you have the floor first.
First of all, we'd like to thank New Zealand for its suggestion and for its attempt to simplify our work. We are flexible as far as this text is concerned, but we would ask the Secretariat something. Do you think we could please get the text up on the screen so that we can all see it? We do have the technology, and if we had it up on the screen, it would certainly make it easier for some of us to read and understand it. We are reforming the organization, after all. This would be a very nice reform to make. Thank you.
Right. Technology has its issues. So if you really want to have that on screen, then we'll have to suspend the item for a while. It's up to you. Otherwise, there's another option that Secretariat reads it. But I'll leave it open to your choice, sir.
Monsieur le Président. Thank you, Chairman. Well, if you think it makes things difficult for the Secretariat, then we can agree to work without it on the screen. But I would like to ask the Secretariat, please take this concern into account for later agenda items. We adopted the general program of work without seeing the changes up on the screen. We've done exactly the same thing with the resolution on innovation and intellectual property. The next time, when there are a lot of amendments to be looked at, we would like this kind of thing to be put up on the screen. That way, all delegations in the room will be more easily be able to understand and follow the discussion. Thank you very much.
Very good point and well noted, and I think Secretariat should make it possible next time. Congo, you have the floor.
Thank you. We agree with Algeria. When we want to seek consensus, everybody needs to be on board. And I was in the working group yesterday working on intellectual property strategy, and I didn't say anything because I can't take the floor in English. I do understand English when I read it, but for the next meeting we really need interpreters when we are addressing very important issues. I couldn't take part in that meeting because of the fact that I couldn't express myself in English, and we need to make sure everyone is on board. Thank you.
Thank you, Congo. Again, a very valid point, and I would request Secretariat to take note of it, so that informal meetings, whenever they are approved by the board, they should have interpreters. Japan.
With regards to this subject, I think we have more agenda and more decisions to review. Is it possible, not from next EB or sessions, is it possible to start this display on the screen from this afternoon at least? That will speed up our discussion. Thank you very much for your consideration.
Is that possible? We can look at that. Well, I think Secretariat can play wonders. They will do it. Just saying it. So from this afternoon, sir, we will have it on the screen. May I now request Secretariat to read the text?
Thank you, Chair. Paragraph 1, to develop as a priority and in consultation with Member States and other stakeholders as appropriate, comma, and in coordination also with the regional officers, a draft action plan for the platforms to address health effects of climate change, initially in small island developing states, and to submit the draft action plan for consideration by the 72nd World Health Assembly in May 2019 through the Executive Board at its 144th session in January 2019. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, sir. So are we ready to adopt the amended document EB 142/12, New Zealand?
Sorry, my understanding was that Sri Lanka had also asked for its addition in Para 2 to be removed as well. And so it's just for clarity that this has been, the complete documents agreed in that respect.
Thank you, Chair. I think I might address Sri Lanka and France's concern. Just if I now read the paragraph 2, removing the Sri Lankan addition with the special attention to the work environment. So the paragraph would read, to develop in consultation with Member States and other stakeholders as appropriate, and in coordination also with the regional officers and with other relevant UN programs and specialised agencies such as UNEP, a draft comprehensive global strategy on health, environment and climate change to be considered by the 72nd World Health Assembly in May 2019 through the Executive Board at its 144th session in January 2019. Further, an amendment to the chapeau to take note of the report on health, environment and climate change, the commitment by the Director General to address health effects of climate change in small island developing states and other vulnerable states, removing the word setting and replacing it with states, and then the paragraph continues on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Malta, you have the floor.
Thank you. I just wanted to seek clarity on PP1, where we propose to delete reference to the 3 decisions on the Convention on Biological Diversity, just to make sure that they're included too. It's been taken care of. Thank you.
Thank you, Malta. Just to clarify that the paragraph would finish after on environment and health. So the words as well as decisions, etc., will be removed as per your instruction. Thank you. Sorry for the confusion there.
So any other concerns or inputs? I do understand. I think I would tend to agree further with Algeria and Congo that we need to have in future in writing something on the screen. That would make the tasks much easier. So for the time being, if there are no objections, the decision is therefore adopted as amended. Thank you very much. This concludes the board's consideration of sub-item 3.5.
Okay.
We shall now consider sub-item 4.5, improving access to assistive technology. The report by the Director General is contained in document EB 142/21. Sorry. Is this the one? This one. There were a number of other states as well. The board is invited to note this report and to consider the draft resolution contained in document EB 142 conference/2 entitled Improving Access to Assistive Technology, which is proposed by Algeria, China, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Ethiopia, France, Germany, Ghana, Iraq, Israel, Jamaica, Pakistan, Philippines, and Zambia. I hope I haven't missed a few. The financial and administrative implications of this draft resolution, should it be adopted, are contained in document EB 142/conference/2 addendum 1. I now open the floor for comments. Pakistan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning to everyone. Pakistan is very thankful to all the member states who are working very closely with us on this resolution. The conference paper which is present today is the conference paper which was produced quite some time ago. And there were some small additions done by member states. And in order to reach consensus, Pakistan and Ecuador worked with all the member states. And we came up 2 days ago with a draft text, which was mostly and generally agreeable to all. I would request the Secretariat to read out the amendments and circulate the fresh text again. Thank you.
Do we have text?
They need to circulate them.
Right, so they would be circulating it. In the meantime, can we have comments from Japan and then followed by Swaziland? Japan, you have the floor, sir.
Mr. Chair, may I come back later because my essence of intervention is relating to draft resolution. Thank you.
Would you also like to wait, Swaziland, or you would like to come in now? Please, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Swaziland is greatly honored to take the floor to present a statement on behalf of the 47 member states of the Africa region on improving access to assistive technology. We congratulate the Director General and the Secretariat for the very detailed report on assistive technology. The report highlights the work of the global cooperation on assistive technology on this area, which the Africa region deeply appreciates. As correctly detailed in the report, the global increase in the burden of disability is alarming, and this is quite true for the Africa region in particular. The region is battling with a double epidemic of both communicable and non-communicable diseases, which contribute immensely on the burden of disability. Unfortunately, and notably so, the challenges in access to assistive technology that the report detailed are more pronounced in the Africa region. Our region is home to millions of people in need of different kinds of assistive technology products, yet very few have access to them due to the reasons highlighted in the report. Mr. Chairman, the Director General's report also reminds us that access to assistive technology is not only a UHC issue, but a fundamental human rights issue. The challenges to access on assistive technology as detailed in the report are health systems challenges, and as such, addressing them requires a health systems approach. The Africa region appreciates the report on the different initiatives that the WHO Secretariat has embarked on to improve access to assistive technology. This is commendable. However, more work remains to be done. The Africa region would like to submit the following to the Secretariat for consideration. 1, to speed up finalization and dissemination of the assistive technology policy framework. Member states are more likely to get leverage on it as they improve their work on this matter. 2, to establish, strengthen procurement mechanisms, including pooled procurement, to improve access to high-quality, affordable assistive technology products globally. A special focus and consideration may be made for the high-burden, low-access countries. 3, to consider, if not already, doing mathematical modeling on the impact of assistive technology on the economy and health outcomes in the low and middle income countries. This may create a compelling evidence for investing in assistive technology and would be a good advocacy tool for UHC in our member states. The Africa region notes the report and supports the draft resolution as proposed. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Swaziland. May I request, before we move on to other member states, may I request the Secretariat to read out the amendments which has been added? You have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So turning first to the second preambular paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, the words "many health conditions" have been deleted and replaced with the word comorbidities, such that the preambular paragraph reads, noting that assistive technology enables and promotes the inclusion, participation, and engagement of persons with disabilities, aging populations, and people with comorbidities in the family, community, and all areas of society, including the political, economic, and social spheres. Turning next to preambular paragraph 5, there are 3 amendments. And so maybe I will just read the new paragraph. It reads, recognizing that the inclusion of assistive technology into health systems is essential to realizing progress towards the SDG targets relating to universal health coverage in line with countries' national priority and context, inclusive and equitable quality education, inclusive and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all, reduce inequality within and among countries by empowering and promoting the social, economic, and political inclusion of all, make cities and human settlements inclusive, safe, and sustainable, and provide universal access to safe, inclusive, and accessible green and public spaces, particularly for persons with disabilities. Moving on to operative paragraph 1.1, there is an addition at the end of the paragraph which reads, and to spread knowledge, techniques of assistive products via internet, such that the new operative paragraph 1.1 reads, to develop, implement, and strengthen policies and programs as appropriate to improve access to assistive technology within universal health and/or social services coverage, and to spread knowledge, techniques of assistive products via internet. Turning next to operative paragraph 1.4,
The first two words, where appropriate, have been removed, and the last words, as relevant and or applicable based on national needs and context, has also been removed, such that the new paragraph reads, based on national needs and context, develop a national list of priority assistive products that are affordable and cost-effective and meet minimum quality and safety standards, drawing on WHO's priority assistive products list to establish Internet for the supply and service of assistive products. Turning now to operative paragraph 2, subparagraph 1. The paragraph has been amended so as to read, by 2021, to prepare a global report on access to assistive technology in the context of an integrated approach based on the best available scientific evidence.
Yeah, Pakistan.
Thank you, Chair, and my sincere apologies to jump in just like that, but we were extremely efficient, and we negotiated the draft last year after 7 informal consultations with the member states, and till 2 days ago, after submission on 10th of November, with everybody's agreement, we just got more comments, and we incorporated in another draft. I think there is a confusion with the number of drafts that are being floated at the moment, but I think the copy that Secretariat still has at the moment is not the correct one. The copies that I have reflect the true changes. So I would appreciate if Secretariat can use this draft for circulation and reading out the amendments. Again, we apologize if there is some confusion between the drafts with the Secretariat. But this is the right draft, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Pakistan. In that case, what I would suggest, and we would ask the board for their opinion, is that we suspend this item for a little while so that the Secretariat has time to print all the copies, and then we would come back to this item, if that is agreeable to the board. So we will suspend the item and move on to the next item, and would request the Secretariat to get the copies. So we move on to item 4.6. And do we have the...
Thank you. Thank you.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to open up the item 4.6, which is maternal, infant, and young child nutrition. The report by the Director General entitled Maternal, Infant, and Young Child Nutrition is contained in document EB 142/22. The board is invited to note this report and to consider the draft decision contained in paragraph 29. The financial and administrative implications of this draft decision, should it be adopted, are contained in document EB 142/22 Addendum 1. I have been informed by the Secretariat that we will not be considering document EB 142/23 at this point in time. I now open the floor for comments on document EB 142/22. The floor is open. France, you have the floor, followed by Algeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chairman. I didn't actually want to comment on the document. I just wanted to fully understand what you've just explained. On the nutrition item, have you said that we're going to just consider the report rather than all of the sub-items? I don't really understand, because the two items are linked. So I don't really know why we're separating them out. We'd like all of the item to be addressed today, just as it would probably be useful to complete consideration of the technical items before we move on to administrative items. And this part of the issues should be considered fully. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that point. May I request the Secretariat to give a bit of explanation on this?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for that comment and question from France. As the Chair indicated earlier today, following discussions with the Chair last night, and given how far behind we are moving on time, we decided, the Chair, and I felt with your agreement this morning, that we would focus on items for which the board is required to make an active action, i.e. where the items are decisions and resolutions. Therefore, we've brought all those items forward onto the agenda, such as that there is ample time, we hope, for the board to conduct its work and make considered decisions. Items for which the board is only being requested to be noted have been pushed further down the agenda, such that if time does not allow for discussion, the Chair can ask the board whether you have read those papers and have had the opportunity to note them. In relationship to that, yes, there are two sub-items under the item on nutrition. The first of these, the Comprehensive Implementation Plan, has a decision point associated with it. The other paper on conflict of interest was for the board to note. So we brought the decision point, the item for which there's a decision point, forward for your consideration now. That's the explanation. Thank you, Chair.
Yes, but listening to the Honourable Delegate from France, if I may propose, and if that's possible from Secretariat point of view, that we consider them together. Instead of taking two documents, we can have similar, the two documents discussed together. So is there a technical issue in it? That's a good idea. Yeah. We'll have New Zealand's views in this.
I mean, I fully appreciate there's a lot of pressure on here, and there is another option that's open to us, which would allow potentially both items to be discussed. And that would be that whilst I certainly appreciate that member states are keeping within the 2-minute timeline, the efficiency and the effectiveness of the process could be improved, and further time can be saved by giving interventions that do not restate the problem statement described in the paper, and by not including examples of activities within their country or their organisation before declaring support for a paper or suggesting a possible amendment. These explanatory statements can be posted in the WHO Statements webpage by posting them to statements@who.int. Identifying possible areas for change keep the debate focused on whether the proposals in a paper or resolution are appropriate or need to be amended to inform the EB and allow it to make an intelligent, informed, considered decision, which after all is the purpose of the EB. You know, for example, in the past paper that's on hold just now, we would simply be saying, thanks to Pakistan and Ecuador for their leadership, we wish to be a co-sponsor, and we support the resolution. End of intervention. And we can all do that and move this on much faster.
This is excellent suggestion, New Zealand, and we would urge all the members to adopt this. But coming back to this session, if I see no objections to this, we may propose to consider the two documents together And if member states have separate statements for it, and if you can merge it into one, well and good. If not, then please identify that this is for this document and this is for the next document. If I see no objection to this, we'll go ahead with this idea. And thank you very much for your support. And thank you, Madam, for pointing this out. So now we'll be considering EB 142/22 Addendum 1, as well as EB 142/23. So the floor is open for discussion. Burundi, you have the floor, sir, and then Netherlands.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Burundi is taking the floor on the 2 points on behalf of the African region member states. On the first point, it is our honor to convey our group's opinion on 4 and 6 of the biennial report and the comprehensive implementation plan on maternal, infant and young child nutrition. We welcome the progress that has been made. On delayed growth, as a result of substantive efforts made by the Secretariat to support member states, we see that there is a drop in the level of the problem and that many countries are improving their position. As to anemia, the African region here would like to ask WHO to invest substantially in anemia control, especially in women of reproductive age, since according to the report, the highest rates are found in the African region. There aren't sufficient studies on the issue of low birth weight either. We urge WHO and its partners to encourage research on low birth weight so as to produce objective data and scientific evidence on the basis of which decisions can then be made. The problem of people being overweight is not uncommon in Africa, but what's troubling is that it's a trend that's increasing worldwide. Member states of the African group request WHO to support member states in either curbing or reversing this trend. Turning to breastfeeding, the trend observed in Africa and globally is encouraging, and the African region commends the Secretariat for the constant support and guidance it provides to WHO member states. At this session of the Executive Board, we cannot say nothing about the distribution and marketing of salmonella-contaminated milk. We urge member states to be more vigilant about the marketing of breast milk substitutes, and we request the Secretariat to provide clear guidance on ending all inappropriate forms of promotion of foods for infants and young children. We note the Secretariat report and request member states to adopt the proposed decisions. As to possible conflict of interest, we congratulate the Secretariat for preparing and providing the report. General principles have been taken into account. A stage-by-stage decision-making process should help member states to avoid conflicts of interest in terms of nutrition. We believe that public-private partnerships are having a greater and greater influence on decision-making and the regulatory authority of governments. The risk is that commercial or marketing interests may get too much influence, and that could be a risk particularly for young children and infants because of marketing of processed foods and foods with a high-level fat content. Obviously, this leads to non-communicable diseases in the long run and obesity as well. The African group supports the 6-stage procedure, and we hope that each stage will be followed up by evaluation. What we need is a living document, one which can be adapted and adjusted to the needs of individual member states. The African group notes the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Brundi. May I remind the timekeeper to time the regional statements for 5 minutes and country statements for 2 minutes, so that we are also clear how the time is moving. I would request Netherlands to be followed by France.
Thank you, Chair. The Netherlands intervention focuses on the second document on conflict of interest. Chair, as requested by the Member States, the Secretariat has developed a draft approach for the prevention and management of conflicts of interest in policy development and implementation of nutrition programs at country level. The proposed way forward is now to pilot this approach at country level in the 6 WHO regions to test its applicability and practical value. The Secretariat has consulted Member States and stakeholders in the process of developing the approach. However, we think there is reason for more consultation and reflection. The response on the last online consultation was very limited. I have to admit, my country was not among the very few Member States that gave feedback. Maybe the timing was not very lucky. September is the month of the WHO regional committees, and the time to respond was very short. In the past weeks, we received several messages pointing our attention to the Scaling Up Nutrition, or SUN movement, that operates 10 principles of engagement. The application of these 10 principles seems easier and less burdensome than the draft approach before us. Could the Secretariat tell to what extent it has considered the SUN principles of engagement? An explicit comparison between these SUN principles of engagement and the draft WHO approach would be very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Netherlands. France, you have the floor, to be followed by Dominican Republic.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm speaking on the second document. France welcomes the draft report on safeguarding against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition programs, and notes that the principles and provisions which exist in France in this respect already are fully in line with what the report advocates. As we decided at the beginning of this point, and in the interest of time management, I do not intend to go in those practices in detail here. We will publish what I would have said on the WHO website. We fully support WHO's work and hope that it will be continued in order to provide Member States with tools which will make it easier to collate and analyze possible conflicts of interest in any decisions relating thereto. This work would be more useful if it were expanded, incidentally, to other areas of public health as well. France would like to underscore the need to coordinate this work with that done by other bodies active in this area, particularly the work done by the Committee on Food Security and/or the Scaling Up Nutrition movement. Thank you.
Thank you, France. We give the floor to the Honorable Delegate from Dominican Republic, which would be followed by Iraq.
Chairman, thank you. We are referring to document 14222, the application of integral measures to bring an end to all forms of malnutrition and national nutrition plans, justify round tables which would encourage this problem to be tackled by bodies outside the health system as well, particularly industry. We need to get industry on board so that we can make sure that safe and good quality nutritional products produced for mothers and young children is a profitable activity. We need, we think, for more resources to be put into the International Code on the marketing of breast milk substitutes and step up the efforts we've been making to ensure that the appropriate regulations be provided to food manufacturers and healthcare providers so that they can encourage the safe use of formula and breast milk substitutes. It is essential that the organization, however, continue to support breastfeeding and involve specialized organizations bringing together neonatal specialists, pediatric specialists and nutritional specialists because they are so closely involved in these matters. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. Iraq, you have the floor, and then Zambia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairperson. Really, that has been reflected to a strategic work plan and implementation plan asserting the following points. The first, collaborative action between the country and international organizations, including WHO, UNICEF, WFP, and other related organizations and donors. Secondly, in Iraq, we have the strategic work plan for nutrition and food safety, to which we are declining. Thirdly, concentration in implementation work plan on response for emergency situation, focusing on nutritional assessment for all vulnerable groups, mostly under 5-year children. Fourthly, combining that with strategic work plan for reproductive health to ensure integrated approach for reducing maternal and child morbidity and mortality. Fifthly, encouraging of breastfeeding with stressing on baby and mother-friendly hospitals. Sixthly, micronutrients deficiencies ought to be emphasized. And seventhly, intersectoral collaboration is mandatory in that implementation work plan. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairperson.
Thank you, Honorable Delegate from Iraq. I request now the respectable delegate from Zambia to take the floor.
Thank you very much, Chair. We share the sentiments expressed by Burundi on behalf of the African region on both issues. On the issue of conflict of interest, we note with appreciation the tool and I hope that it will help us in addressing perceived and actual conflict of interest encountered in our dealings with various actors in the food industry, particularly in regards to food for infants and young children, especially as we strive to uphold best practices such as promoting breastfeeding. We call upon WHO for technical support in the use of the tool. I thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam. Brazil, you have the floor, to be followed by Canada.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chair. Brazil congratulates WHO for its work in nutrition, in particular child and maternal nutrition, and thanks the Secretariat for the report. It's essential to work on promoting and protecting healthy infant nutrition and breastfeeding. Early years in life are critical for children to grow and fully transition into adulthood. In Brazil, about 40% of women exclusively breastfeed their children until the 6th month of life. This is a figure we want to see rise. We support the adoption of the indicators presented by the Secretariat. They are consistent with our national policies and priorities, both in terms of actions to be undertaken by the national health systems, as well as in the criteria for promotion of infant foods. The ultimate objective is to ensure exclusive breastfeeding and to appropriately introduce complementary feeding on the basis of what's best for the health of children. On the UN Decade of Action on Nutrition, Brazil is glad to have been the first country to formally present WHO its SMART commitments, and we encourage other member states to also present those commitments. Look forward to exchanging experiences and best practice. On the second document on prevention and management of conflicts of interest at country level, Brazil believes that this is an important area of the WHO work and encourages the Secretariat to develop pilot projects in all regions to test its applicability and added value. Thank you.
Thank you, Brazil. Canada, you have the floor, and then Mexico.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On sub-item 144/22, we will send in our comments in the interest of time, but just want to flag that we note the entire core set of indicators in the nutrition monitoring framework, and we are making every effort to report on this list in accordance with decision WHA 6814 in 2015. We note that the work that's needed to be done must include the engagement of all actors in compliance with FENSA and including seeking new ways to engage the private sector. And we believe there's an important opportunity to crowd in investments for nutrition during the global financing facilities replenishment period, with nutrition as a priority issue for many country investment cases. Regarding 142/23, I will be making my intervention in French. Le Canada
Canada would like to thank the Secretariat for having drafted the approach outlined in document 142/23, protection against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition programs is absolutely essential if we are to maintain public trust in initiatives to promote healthy nutrition. Canada believes that this approach is a tool to support and add to existing national approaches on protecting against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition-related initiatives. We shall continue to keep a close eye on the further development of this approach. Thank you.
Thank you, Canada. Mexico, to be followed by Italy.
Thank you, Chairman. I should be referring to document EB 142/23. Mexico is grateful for the content of the report prepared by the Secretariat. The draft approach is a complete and clear document, one which provides elements which will be useful to help us better understand and use tools we have against possible conflicts of interest. It will no doubt be a useful and helpful guide to countries because the points made in it will help them to guide their action to deal with possible conflicts of interest in nutrition programs. We believe it important that we take into account the participation of outside parties in formal roundtables. We don't just want them to be involved in online consultations. We also believe it essential to have an integral approach to nutrition, and that requires the active and committed participation of all parties concerned. We should take into account also that states have formal mechanisms to collate the opinions of all parties in society usually, and those should be used to avoid any possible conflicts which may arise in the design, selection and implementation of any program, not just those related to nutrition. In order to get the best possible benefit for their people, governments could consider the positions taken of other parties by involving them in their work programs as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Mexico. We move on to Italy and then Tanzania.
Italy thanks the DG and the Secretariat for the report on possible conflict of interest in nutrition programs. Italy agrees that the first priority actions on the plan is to create a supportive environment for the implementation of comprehensive food and nutrition policies and form alliances and partnership to expand nutrition actions and introduce adequate mechanisms to safeguard against potential conflict of interest. In this perspective, a preliminary analysis of the document appears to propose a tool designed to exclude more than to include, and not particularly useful for promoting a multi-stakeholder approach. This seems to be in contrast with the approach used in the Decade of Action on Nutrition, which provides for maximum interaction between all the subjects involved. We have the impression that the approach is burdensome and difficult to manage by national authorities. We are convinced that a more manageable approach based on transparency and accountability and less burdensome and cumbersome and also aimed at inducing all the stakeholders not to exert unduly influence can be developed. Italy takes very seriously nutrition as an important factor for a long and healthy life, as shown by scientific data that confirms our Mediterranean diet as one of the main drivers of the good health indicators in our country. And since 2012 has adopted national policies to manage domestic conflict of interest that have been incorporated into the 3-year plan for the prevention of corruption and transparency of the Ministry of Health. For these reasons, we underline that the adoption of the proposed instrument should not be considered mandatory in the presence of national rules that insist on the same subject. In conclusion, we think there is a need for a broader and thoughtful evaluation. Thank you.
Thank you, Whitley. Honorable Delegate from Tanzania, you have the floor, and then Philippines.
Mr. Chairperson, Tanzania aligns itself with the statement that was made by Burundi on behalf of the 47 African region nations. We welcome the progress made towards the global targets, especially in addressing stunting. Regarding anemia, the African region has not done very well. We need to continue investing on addressing contributors of anemia in African region, which strengthen NTD programs which target worms, as well as continue with malaria interventions as a way to ending the anemia scourge. We echo what Burundi has said on the need for WHO to provide a clear guidance on ending all inappropriate promotion of foods for infants and young children. We support the adoption of the proposed decision, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Tanzania. Philippines, and then Thailand.
Thank you, Chair. This is on the document 142/23. The Philippines notes the biennial report and the progress achieved so far. The Philippines wishes to inform the group that as a contribution to the creation of a supportive environment for the implementation of a comprehensive food and nutrition policies, the ASEAN Leaders' Declaration to end all forms of malnutrition was adopted during the ASEAN Summit of 2017. Conflict of interests have been a contentious issue and have been a difficulty of many countries to manage and control in every aspect of public health policy development. With this, we welcome the approach developed by the WHO Secretariat. And noting that while the approach is yet to be tested, the Philippines will explore its use, especially in engaging with the private sector for scaled-up action in nutrition, as Philippines is a member country of Scaling Up Nutrition Movement. For the meantime, we recommend that WHO takes an active stance in avoiding engagement with industries that have inherent conflict of interest, such as tobacco and alcohol companies and infant milk companies. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Philippines. Thailand, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Thailand will recognize two documents at the same time. Thailand agree on the extension to 2030. However, we would like it to be more proactive. First, the WHO should maintain its key role on nutrition at global and regional level, in particular to strengthen its role on technical support and monitoring and evaluation, to include tracking tools and proposed targets. Second, trained nutrition professional and health workforce on nutrition is the key driver for the target achievement. Third, the legal interventions to facilitate the success of nutrition targets require appropriate skill sets. WHO has a big role to play to improve this capacity. Chair, when we move on the act to control the marketing of infant food, we face serious conflict of interest. We support the principles and 6 main steps of the conflict of interest tools. We support the pilot approach at country levels to test its applicabilities and practical value. Finally, we cannot delay moving this agenda. We support the draft decision and approve the full list of indicators as proposed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Thailand. We move on to non-EB member states, and I'll open the floor with USA to be followed by Panama. USA, you have the floor.
Chair, and I'll be making our statement separately. So starting with agenda item 4.6a, improving nutrition amongst mothers, infants, and young children is an important priority for the United States, domestically and globally. The United States believes that many aspects of the comprehensive implementation plan are crucial to achieving progress and therefore support that the work on these items be extended to align with the 2030 agenda. We continue to have concerns that some of the tools associated with this plan are not consensus or evidence-based recommendations and therefore will not help us progress progress towards our shared mutual goal. The U.S. is working to update our dietary guidelines, which will include recommendations both for pregnant women and infants under 2 years old. These recommendations could be a good model for other countries to consider as a way to protect and promote breastfeeding while balancing the fact that there are situations where supplemental and complementary products are needed. The United States supports the expansion of nutrition surveillance efforts, but has reservations with the Net Code Toolkit that refers to technical guidance, which was not endorsed nor improved by the WHA in 2016, but instead welcomed with appreciation. The U.S. has confirmed with WHO Legal that those terms are not synonymous. Since there was confusion at a recent Codex meeting, the U.S. requests that all WHO staff be advised that note means note, welcome means welcome, endorse means endorse, and adopt means adopt. And welcome does not mean endorse, nor does it mean adopt. On agenda item 4.6b, we continue to have concerns about the draft approach and tools proposed on safeguarding against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition programs due to its overarching tone of exclusion. The Scaling Up Nutrition Initiative, a public-private effort, has a lot of experience with conflict of interest. We have heard concerns that the current draft guidance may negatively impact the successful initiative. Many national governments likewise have functioning COI policies, and the draft guidance should build upon and learn from these efforts rather than conflict with them. It is imperative WHO Sorry, Chair, just to finish, that we would like to request additional time frame to consider these draft guidance, as there's some significant confusion about how it applied to current programs. So we'd like to ask that the documents not be finalized until the 144th Executive Board to allow more member state consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, USA. It is challenging to contain 2 statements in 2 minutes. I can understand that, but thank you very much for trying to stick to time. Our next country is Panama, to be followed by Germany. You have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. We would like to reiterate our commitment to breastfeeding and to the implementation of regulations which make it possible to encourage and protect it. We support initiatives to protect countries against conflicts of interest, not only in nutrition programs, but in any programs which are designed to protect public health and the life and health of individuals, nationally, regionally, and globally. We believe that any initiative to tackle this issue needs to be in step with FENSA so as to avoid sending out confusing signals to non-state actors. We agree on the need to modify the baby-friendly hospital initiative, taking it on the basis of a more integrated approach, and therefore we believe this proposal should be deferred until further analysis has been done. We have points that support this request, but in order to save time, I'll hand them into the Secretariat in writing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Panama. We would request Germany to take the floor and then Peru.
Thank you, Chair. Germany is delivering this statement on behalf of Latvia and Germany. We would like to thank the Secretariat for this comprehensive report. We appreciate the efforts made by the Advisory Group on Nutrition Monitoring. However, we see difficulties with Indicator 2 and 4. They do not seem to be very suitable to measure progress in the field of implementation on maternal, infant, and young child nutrition in countries like Germany and Latvia. Indicator 2 contradicts current scientific knowledge about iron supplementation and corresponding national recommendations in our country. In Germany and other countries, iron supplementation should be determined individually based on medical advice. Scientific evidence shows that increased iron intake in women with an adequate iron status may have adverse effects. We also have concerns on Indicator 4, which is the number of trained nutrition professional density. The number of such professionals doesn't always allow conclusions about the amount of pregnant women receiving nutritional advice. This is due to the fact that in our countries, those nutrition professionals are not integrated into the routine health system. Nutritional advice is mainly covered by health professionals with a specific training on nutrition. Therefore, a more adequate indicator would be the number of health professionals working with pregnant women and families with young children, which receive a nutrition pre-service or in-service training. Therefore, we would like to make a friendly amendment and request the Secretariat to include lessons learned from Member States in the WHO operational guidance on the Global Nutrition Monitoring Framework. so that adequate flexibility is built in to accommodate specific country needs. One last point. At least one of the indicators should take into account the threatening transition from poor and undernutrition to caloric overnutrition all over the globe. This needs to be considered as a massive global challenge, especially with regards to the extended timeline of the action plan until 2030. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Germany. I will give the floor to Colombia.
Microphone, please. Thank you. We're grateful for this document on the plan on maternal, infant and young child nutrition. Our country is committed to improving health, the quality of food provided to our people and nutrition, and especially for those who are in a vulnerable position. We support the draft of a decision, and we believe it particularly appropriate that we approve the follow-up to the 4 indicators proposed, insofar as they make it possible to monitor processes which will lead us to a point where we can measure our global impact. We do need mechanisms to help us assess how much progress countries are making, and in order to identify and share positive experiences. We are also grateful for the report on safeguarding against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition programs. On this point, we believe that the proposed instrument for the handling of conflicts of interest is a very relevant document, especially for managing precisely this kind of situation. In as far as it refers to nutrition programs, it certainly responds to the need for people to have specific, complete and accessible information related to nutrition. We would suggest that in the instrument we more strongly highlight the involvement of scientists, academia and outside parties when conflicts of interest are dealt with. We need to emphasize the training of health professionals too, because it is they who have to guarantee that patients have trust in what they're doing, and that means avoiding situations which they should not be getting into and which would make it difficult for them to provide the greatest possible benefit to patients. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I would request Peru to take the floor, to be followed by United Kingdom.
Chairman, thank you. We are grateful to the Secretariat for having presented the documents on this agenda item. Peru has a series of government policies aimed at improving the quality of diet, nutrition, and healthy housing for our people. We try to provide hemoglobin of good quality at the appropriate time, food supplements and iron supplements for children under the age of 3, young people and pregnant mothers, and furthermore we promote the consumption of foods which are low sugar content and have no saturated and/or trans fats. On the handling of conflict of interests, we believe that the WHO framework for FENSA is fully relevant because it should be applied to all areas of the involvement of the organization with non-state actors. We acknowledge that the proposal recognizes differences when it comes to handling conflicts of interest related to nutrition programs at national level, and we hope that at the pilot phase proposed by the Secretariat we will be able to have a document which includes lessons learned that will help us to further perfect the approach proposed with the support and consultation of all member states. Lastly, we salute the support which has already been expressed to this initiative by other delegations. Thank you.
United Kingdom, to be followed by Indonesia.
Thank you, Chair. I'm speaking about document EB 142/23. The UK supports the WHO in its desire to create a tool for member states to use in safeguarding against potential conflicts of interest in nutrition programmes. Working with non-state actors is crucial to the development and implementation of effective policies on nutrition, but we must also acknowledge that conflicts of interest can arise and must be guarded against. A well-designed tool can help member states to navigate this and achieve the positive collaboration needed. We would therefore support the calls for further consultation with all relevant stakeholders on the tool as it is developed further. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, UK. Indonesia, you have the floor, and then Poland.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the Secretariat for preparing the report on comprehensive implementation plan on maternal, infant, and young child nutrition. To end all form of malnutrition and to accelerate stunting reduction, Indonesia has launched a national program on integrated nutrition intervention. In 2019, the program will be carried out in 100 districts and 1,000 villages throughout of the country. Mr. Chairman, recognizing that nutrition is central in achieving sustainable goals, Indonesia supports the extension to 2030 of the 2025 Global Nutrition Target with adjustment on target of each indicators to be achieved in 2030. To ensure a successful achievement of the target, WHO should intensify its work with member states in stepping up the effort and investment on nutrition. My delegation agreed to the 4 remaining indicators of the Global Monitoring Framework on maternal, infant, and young child nutrition as set out in the report. However, we are mindful that adjustment program and time allocation is needed to ensure that each country has the necessary capacity and data to meet the 4 proposed indicators. I thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Poland and then Burkina Faso.
Thank you very much, Chair. To be brief as possible, Poland aligns itself with the statement on behalf of Germany and Latvia and wishes to make some additional comments. The similar situation as presented by German delegate refers in our case also to the indicator on availability of lactating counseling. It should be noted that the care of a woman in this area is exercised in Poland by a midwife. We can assume that the midwife's patronage visits are devoted, among others, to lactation counseling. After the 6th week after birth, the care over a child is passed on to the nurse, while the midwife carries out the care of the woman at every stage of her life. Lactation visits are not separately indicated. In connection with the above, the implementation of the indicator under consideration may be difficult to monitor due to the lack of detailed data. Therefore, we ask for flexibility clause to accommodate specific country needs. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Poland. Burkina Faso and then Nigeria.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, the delegation of Burkina Faso would like to associate itself with the statement made by Burundi, speaking on behalf of AFRO. Burkina Faso also wishes to welcome the Secretariat and congratulate them on the high quality of this document. We know that maternal, infant and child health and nutrition is a major public health issue in Burkina Faso. However, thanks to cooperation with foreign partners, we have been able to make our system more robust and to ensure that our community health system, particularly for nutrition, has significantly improved recently. And in fact, the quality of services that we offer now to infants and to mothers is much better than it was in the past, and we see real impacts of that. How then have we achieved that? We have achieved it through technical assistance provided by a range of organizations in order to establish programs for appropriate feeding and nutrition, and we're very grateful to all of our cooperation partners. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Nigeria to be followed by India.
We are aligned with the African region statement by Burundi. Nigeria has unsatisfactory maternal and child nutrition indices. Efforts are being put in place to accelerate the reduction of maternal and child malnutrition. We have a number of policy instruments being developed to address food and nutrition with costed national strategic plan of action, national strategy on maternal, infant and young child nutrition, and national regulations on the marketing of breast milk substitutes and protocols on training, monitoring and enforcement of compliance to ensure breastfeeding is protected, promoted, and supported. We are of the opinion that the interventions, when implemented effectively, will reduce stunting, anemia, low birth weight, overweight, and obesity, in line with the global targets proposed for 2030. However, support is needed to address the significant resource gaps in terms of nutrition professionals and funding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. India, you have the floor, and then Ecuador.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. India thanks the WHO Secretariat for document number EB 14223, against possible conflicts of interest in nutrition program. Having examined the contents of the document carefully, India acknowledges that successful management of conflict of interest is critical to engagement with non-state actors. India supports the proposed tools for decision-making for the prevention and management of conflict of interest in the policy development and implementation of nutritional programs, including its 6 steps. India proposes to participate in the country-level pilot to be undertaken by the WHO Secretariat to test the applicability and practical value of the proposed decision-making tools. Accordingly, the possibility of developing national policies and procedures as per the national legal framework and country context can be explored. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, India. Ecuador, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll endeavour to be very brief and deal with 2 items. First of all, exclusive breastfeeding. For the proper protection, it has to go hand in hand with proper regulations of public policy in order to see to it that inadequate activities when it comes to marketing different products for infants, that this be set aside. We have to be aware of the advantages of breastfeeding. This should be the focus within the resolution, and the elimination of conflicts of interest. We support this for Ecuador. It's very important to say we must continue talking about prevention of conflict of interest and look at all the various aspects and different ways of interference. So we're quite worried to see that in the document they talk about a number of problems arising from the work between non-state actors and governments, and all too often turn a blind eye to conflicts of interest. Expert groups, academics, communicators, and others providing information. We know it's very important for the food industry to recognize scientific evidence that's available and national health policy as well generated therefrom, so that we can better develop the role of prevention and control of malnutrition. This is an aspect that we would like to have included in future versions of the documents. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam. We'll move on to observers. And Palestine, you have the floor.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. La Palestine...
Thank you, Chair. Palestine wishes to thank the Secretariat for this report dealing with conflicts of interest in nutrition programs. Elaborating nutrition programs requires cooperation and a multi-sectoral approach. That means that additional costs have to be generated to manage conflicts of interest at national level. Palestine would encourage active and targeted technical assistance to be provided by WHO in order to allow us to achieve our nutrition goals. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. May I now request UNICEF to take the floor?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. UNICEF welcomes the progress made by countries to implement the actions to reach the WHO's global maternal, infant and young child nutrition targets for 2025. One of the key actions that requires more attention is the promotion, protection and support of breastfeeding. Breastfeeding gives all children the healthiest start in life. It stimulates brain development, protects women's health and lowers healthcare costs. UNICEF colleagues with WHO, a global breastfeeding collective partners to raise political commitment and financial investment in breastfeeding programs, and we provided technical support to countries in strengthening implementation on the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes, including providing guidance on ending the inappropriate marketing of foods for infants and young children. As indicated in the biennial report, adoption of the 10 steps to successful breastfeeding in all maternity facilities is important to enhance the protection, promotion, and support of breastfeeding. Finally, given the vital role of appropriate and timely support on infant and young child feeding in emergencies, UNICEF was also pleased to work with WHO and other partners on the updating of the operational guidance on infant and young child feeding in emergencies. We would like to call for greater attention to the improvement of young children's diets, which is essential for the reduction of stunting and other forms of malnutrition. We also made maternal nutrition a key focus in our new strategic plan, and as mentioned also earlier today, we would like to highlight that anemia has not improved since the launch of the global targets, with 1/3 of women still affected globally. considering the implications of risk at birth and low birth weight and the chance of newborn and maternal deaths, scaling up the use of iron and folic acid supplements during pregnancy will help to prevent these risks. Thank you.
Thank you, UNICEF. We'll move on to non-state actors. And World Cancer Research Fund International, you have the floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. This statement is delivered by the World Cancer Research Fund International, supported by 1,000 Days, Global Health Advocates, Helen Keller International, NCD Alliance, Sun Civil Society Alliance Pakistan, the Union for International Cancer Control, WaterAid, and World Obesity Federation. We congratulate the WHO on the biannual report that details progress made in carrying out the comprehensive implementation plan on maternal, infant, and young child nutrition, and in developing technical guidance on ending the inappropriate promotion of foods for infants and young children. We encourage the EB to welcome the report. We also encourage the WHO Executive Board to approve the 4 remaining indicators for the global monitoring framework and call on all member states to consider the full list of indicators in their national nutrition monitoring frameworks and to report accordingly. As such, the WHO should provide technical assistance to member states when needed to ensure comprehensive implementation of the indicators and accelerate progress toward the global nutrition targets, ensuring coordination and action across multiple sectors. Finally, we call for more member states to adopt legal measures to strengthen implementation and monitoring of the International Code of Marketing of Breast Milk Substitutes and subsequent relevant WHO resolutions in accordance with WHO guidance. Improving breastfeeding rates not only saves lives and improves health in relation to undernutrition and the prevention of non-communicable diseases and overweight and obesity, but also generates significant economic returns that help break the cycle of poverty. Thank you.
Thank you. Medicus Mundi International, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Medicus Mundi International appreciates this opportunity. The statement is supported by People's Health Movement. We congratulate WHO's efforts to advance nutrition of mothers, infants, and young children, but have the following concerns. Adults mediate children's access to food, yet the crisis of malnutrition facing them is largely ignored. The global food system impedes their ability to model healthy food choices. This undermines children's long-term health and must be addressed. The lack of nutrition indicators for breastfeeding and reproductive age women implies that a woman's nutrition is only important during pregnancy. WHO should continue prioritizing interventions that secure women's nutrition throughout their lives. Breastfeeding is increasingly framed as a low-cost investment in health and economic growth, but it's also a human rights issue. Governments and employers must provide the economic and legal infrastructure that enable breastfeeding regardless of its economic dividends. There are no indicators in this plan that monitor men's contributions to infant and child nutrition. Without interventions that create a fairer division of household labor between men and women, breastfeeding and child nutrition policies risk reinforcing patriarchal gender relations. Thank you.
Thank you. Global Health Council, you have the floor.
On behalf of the Global Health Council, supported by its member organization, the American Academy of Pediatrics and NCD Child, we welcome the expressed commitment of countries to end all forms of malnutrition by 2030, along with efforts to align WHO's nutrition targets with the Sustainable Development Agenda. The newly recommended indicators are also appreciated, particularly on dietary diversity, antenatal iron supplementation, and breastfeeding counseling services. Countries face multiple burdens of malnutrition, with populations suffering from stunting, wasting, micronutrients deficiencies, overweight and obesity, and diet-related non-communicable diseases. Good nutritional outcomes begin with the mother, and increasing breastfeeding rates is critically important to reducing preventable child deaths, preventing development of metabolic syndrome and diabetes, preventing childhood obesity, and ensuring long-term health, well-being, and productivity. As professionals caring for America's children, we know that what happens in other countries has an impact on the health of children and families in the U.S., as well as Americans living, traveling, and deployed overseas. We appreciate the enduring leadership of the U.S. government in supporting global health and nutrition, and we look forward to continuing to work with you to save and improve lives in the United States and around the world. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll give the floor now to World Vision International.
Thank you, Chair. World Vision is grateful for WHO's historic leadership in maternal, infant, and young child nutrition, and for the Executive Board prioritizing this issue in this session. There is perhaps no other singular issue aside from poverty itself presenting a contingency for success across the SDGs. While we applaud the efforts for those countries that have turned their tide in relation to some forms of malnutrition, such as stunting, we are haunted by the specter of nearly 670 million children under the age of 5 globally who continue to suffer the gamut of malnutrition afflictions. With regards to the global nutrition targets, 1, we must strengthen institutional capacity to monitor low birth weight. 2, we cannot, on one hand, talk about global agenda of women's and girls' empowerment without significantly elevating and acting on the issue of anemia. 3, we must begin to monitor and address the issue of wasting in infants under 6 months of age. World Vision is supportive of the addition of an indicator to monitor the nutrition workforce and take the occasion to call for concerted effort to rapidly and with innovation increase this density, especially in the most difficult contexts. World Vision is encouraged by the emerging nurturing care framework, which embodies the holistic approach required to ensure life in all its fullness for infants and young children, and hope that it will catalyze an inspired global blueprint for this objective. Given the critical role of the WHO's global leadership in this agenda, a role that no other agency assumes, we celebrate the inclusion of nutrition in the global program of work, and we look forward to contributing to the attainment of the objectives. World Vision encourages all member states to establish national nutrition indicators alongside GDP as your proxy for development and attainment of the SDG vision. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam. Save the Children Fund, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Save the Children calls upon member states to invest in nutrition, focusing on the most deprived and marginalized children and adolescents first. Nearly half of all deaths in children under 5 are attributable to undernutrition. According to World Bank estimates, an additional $7 billion annually is required to reach the WHO targets on anemia, stunting, exclusive breastfeeding, and wasting. A combination of traditional and innovative financing through development assistance and domestic resources, focusing on strong multi-sector national plans, is vital. Save the Children calls upon member states to develop ambitious national nutrition financing roadmaps. But financing is just part of the solution. Despite the overwhelming body of evidence that proves the benefits of breastfeeding, it remains undervalued. We call for renewed prioritization of breastfeeding by member states. While there is a recognized need for certain infants to be formula fed, the marketing activities of some manufacturers and distributors has led to infant formula being used unnecessarily and improperly, ultimately putting children at risk. Primary responsibility for that harm rests with governments. Member states should incorporate the Code of Marketing of Breast Foods Substitutes and subsequent resolutions fully into their laws and regulations, and invest in independent monitoring free from commercial interest and effective enforcement mechanisms. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. International Baby Food Action Network, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Implementing supports for breastfeeding is vital for progress in carrying out the comprehensive plan. Progress remains slow, with only 40% of infants under 6 months exclusively breastfed. Thus, 60% are not meeting the recommendations of the World Health Organization Global Strategy for Infant and Young Child Feeding. Additionally, we are concerned that sustained breastfeeding to 2 years or beyond is not included in the global target, and we would like to see this addition. IPFAN's World Breastfeeding Trends Initiative, which tracks policies and practices in over 84 countries to date, reports an average rate of breastfeeding initiation within the first hour at just above 50%. Exclusive breastfeeding to be roughly 38%, and the median duration of breastfeeding to be 15.5 months. On policies that are needed to support mothers, IPFAN's monitoring found that only 21 out of 84 countries have a policy that includes infant feeding in emergencies, yet this need is rapidly increasing. Of 84 countries, only 10% provided more than 26 weeks of maternity leave. And women in the informal sector, which forms 90% of the world's working women, have no maternity protection. For the elimination of commercial interference in infant and young child feeding through the implementation of the International Code, IPFAN, since 2015, has worked with 77 countries on implementing some or all of its provisions. And of 2016, 40 countries have implemented most of the International Code. We are pleased to have worked with most recent entrants, Armenia, Bolivia, Kosovo, Kuwait, and Vietnam, and have witnessed the opposition from baby food industries in their struggle to achieve this. Additionally, another 31 countries have partially implemented the code, while 12 have voluntary measures only. IPFAN does have concerns regarding the proposed revisions of the BFHI. However, we are pleased...
Can I request the speaker to please finish your intervention? You're well above 2 minutes.
Increased work on code implementation through the net code, and we are pleased to make significant contributions to its independent monitoring free from conflicts of interest. Thank you.
International Lactation Consultant Association, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chairperson. The International Lactation Consultant Association is the association of healthcare professionals who care for breastfeeding families globally. The report of the DG informs us that in breastfeeding counseling, more emphasis is placed on exclusive breastfeeding for the first 6 months than on support for continued breastfeeding for 2 years or beyond. From our work with mothers, we can affirm the need for skilled support through the first 6 months, but parents also need clear messages on continued breastfeeding and ongoing skilled support after 6 months to continue breastfeeding and adequately introduce complementary food. Programs to support, protect and promote breastfeeding are still underfunded. We welcome increased overseas development assistance and investment in the home countries in baby feeding programs. In breastfeeding programs, ILCA welcomes netcode tools and asks for wide use to facilitate monitoring and implementation of all the provisions of the International Code and the guidance on inappropriate promotion of foods for infant and young child food. We are ready to work with WHO and governments on Indicator 3, the availability of breastfeeding counseling. Finally, ILCA agrees that reviewing and updating baby-friendly hospital initiative is necessary. We are, however, deeply concerned about the negative consequences of a change in the numbering, reordering and subjects of the well-known 10 steps. We ask WHO to consider seriously the 300 comments received and the input from the global collaboration ILCA participated in before any final release, and ask delegates not. We welcome the opportunity to continue working with WHO to meet global targets for maternal, infant and young child nutrition, and the actual salmonella cases in France, which spread to 83 countries, calls for revitalization of the WHO guidelines on safer preparation of infant formula. Thank you.
The last speaker for today is FDI World Dental Federation. Please have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. FDI World Dental Federation is the official representative body of over 1 million dentists worldwide. We congratulate WHO on the significant progress made in improving maternal, infant, and child health. Children have unique oral health challenges because of their dependence on parents and caregivers. A child's oral health begins in utero. Poor maternal oral health and malnutrition during pregnancy may lead to disruptions in enamel formation and even a predisposition to early childhood caries. Despite being preventable, dental caries is the most common chronic childhood disease globally, and sugar is the primary factor for the development of dental caries. Encouragingly, the Secretariat's report reveals that the number of countries adopting fiscal policies on sugar-sweetened beverages has doubled from 15 to 30. This momentum matters because sugar taxes are a proven mechanism of improving oral health outcomes. We therefore call upon more countries to implement sugar taxes and to consult with their national dental associations for input. We commend WHO on developing a manual for member states to end the inappropriate promotion of foods for infants and young children. But we are disappointed to see that the manual does not mention how early childhood caries is caused by frequent and prolonged exposure of the teeth to sugar and is often the result of a child going to bed with a bottle of a sweetened drink or drinking at will from a bottle during the day. This is in fact a WHO statement. We strongly encourage member states to implement both the manual and WHO's guideline on sugar intake for adults and children. FDI's practical guide on sugars and dental caries will further inform countries on decreasing overall sugar intake. Thank you.
Thank you. With this, our list of speakers is finished for today. So I'll request Dr. Axelrod, ADG, for her brief comments.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Member States. I will be very brief because we are very close to the lunch. It is the part of our nutrition work. So thank you very much, Member States and non-state actors, for your comments. And it's the political attention to the nutrition is growing. It is the result of outstanding work of all Member States in this room. And WHO is committed to scaling up its country support as shown in our new nutrition strategy covering 2016-2025. In the line of GPW 13, WHO will maintain a strong normative role to define healthy diets and intensive, cost-effective nutrition actions to address all forms of malnutrition. For the global nutrition monitoring framework, we will work with the Member States to update the operational guidelines and describe solutions suitable for all countries. We look forward to collaborate with the Member States to improvement of exclusive breastfeeding rates and the new baby-friendly hospital initiative in the collaboration with the UNICEF will make the promotion and protection and support of breastfeeding. And from my personal view, as a mother of 1-year-old children, it is very important to have the breastfeeding. It gives amazing contact with the baby and protects it from the infections and also from the non-communicable diseases. Regarding the second document, which was today discussed, thank you very much, Member States, for your comments and clarifications. And I should say that engagement of non-state actors sometimes emphasize the success of public health nutrition interventions and open new possibilities of collaboration work. We understand that we have a lot of further work to do and then we have to do it together. We also acknowledge that it is informal consultations with the Member States and other actors may be needed to be convened. This would enable the Member States to get additional feedback on the clarifying of messages and applicability and of the proposed approach to different national contexts. This will also ensure that engagement with the non-state actors that are in the interest of the public health are not discouraged. Rest assured that the WHO considers that it is a living document that will have to be updated with the collection and additional countries' scientific experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your brief and pertinent comments. As I see no more comments, so do I take that the board wishes to take note of the report 142/22 and 23? I see no objections, so the board adopts these reports. Is the board now ready to consider the draft decision contained in paragraph 29 of document EB 142/22? I see no objections, so the decision is therefore adopted. With this, we conclude the board's consideration of item 4.6 and break for lunch. We'll reconvene at 2:30 and open up agenda item 4.5. And by that time, I hope the white paper would have been recirculated. Thank you very much. This is the present for approval of the DPW.